Part 51. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 514. The layout of Yunzhou is different from any place Muzian has seen before, and this palace is a force suspended above the clouds. Muzian walked in the quiet palace garden, glanced around, and found that there were many patrolling servants nearby. Most of the servants were at the Qi training realm, and a few leaders were at the spirit training realm. Muzian tried to scan the surroundings with his spiritual sense, then concealed his own breath, climbed over the wall to the other side of the palace wall, and saw the princess of Yunzhou who had been waiting for him in the courtyard of the front hall. The woman was wearing a carefully tailored silver-white dress, a plain silk scarf with gorgeous cloud patterns, and a gorgeous dress that set off her delicate and moving face, like a plump and bright peony. She seemed to have noticed Muzian's sight and looked up instantly. Muzian came back to his senses, coughed lightly, and said, "Your Highness, everyone is drinking at the banquet today, it's such an important occasion, but you wrote to me. Is there something important?" The princess stared into Muzian's eyes and whispered, "Today's banquet is just a banquet for the emperor to entertain all the ministers, and by the way, he took this opportunity to try to make peace with you. You have already attended it, even if you leave early, the emperor will not say anything." Muzian hesitated. "Such an important occasion, I am chatting with you privately in the side hall, is it really okay?" "I have set up a formation in front of the side hall, Mr. Mu, don't worry." The princess spoke softly, raised her hand and slightly gestured to the seat opposite her. Looking at the boy sitting reservedly on the chair, the princess couldn't help but have a little more approval in her eyes. It must be said that although there have been some offensive actions before, in most cases, the princess felt that this person was still very polite. At least he knew that the emperor was holding a banquet at the moment, and it was not appropriate to meet her here. She knew it, too. But she couldn't wait until the banquet was over to be alone with Muzian. Muzian nodded slightly and smiled, "Then I'm relieved." Speaking of which, on the night of the Daipen Emperor's banquet, Daipen Emperor's fiancée had a private conversation with another man in the side hall. Although it was known that the princess must have something important to discuss with him, it was still hard not to imagine it. "Mr. Mu, do you remember what we talked about when I took you to the Sea of Clouds today?" The princess spoke softly, her beautiful eyes staring at Muzian, and she took the lead in bringing up this topic. Muzian pondered for a moment. "Your Highness, Princess talked to me about a lot of things today. I wonder what you are referring to." "Natural furnace." The princess' voice was gentle and pleasant. "In my experience, Master Mu is the first male natural furnace I have ever seen, and he is also the first cultivator whose natural furnace contains the spiritual energy of the heavenly court. It's just that I don't understand some things about this matter. I wonder if you can ask Master Mu to clear my confusion for me." "Princess, please tell me, I will try my best to answer." Muzian answered very sincerely. "It's not because he is greedy for the other person's body or something. Muzian has always felt that he is a reserved and polite good man, and naturally has no interest in other people's wives. It's just that the other party is doing his best to help him find Yunyanliu, and has stood by him many times in front of Daipen Emperor. This alone makes Muzian feel a little good about him. I only have one question. Where does Mr. Mu's heavenly spiritual energy come from when he gives it to others? This is the question she cares about most so far, and the one she wants to know the most." So after she opened her mouth, the princess stared at Muzian's eyes, wanting to get the answer from him. However, after a moment of silence, Muzian never spoke. The princess' eyes dimmed, and then she soon showed a gentle smile again. "Sorry, I'm too abrupt. If it's inconvenient to answer, forget it." "It's not that I can't answer, but before that, I also want to ask you a question," Muzian said. The princess nodded slightly. "Mr. Mu, please speak. From what you said just now, it seems that you care a lot about the affairs of the heavenly court. But it is rumored that your highness resonates with the great Dao and believes in the power of the great Dao, right? Musian was puzzled. Where does the spiritual energy in the natural furnace come from? What does it mean to you? The princess did not answer, but her expression was a little complicated, and her red lips opened slightly, as if it was difficult to speak. Seeing this, Musian said at the right time, "Since your highness has not made up her mind, then I will take my leave today. After all, this is the palace, and there are many people and eyes. If you see your highness and I alone in this place during the banquet, I am afraid it will cause unnecessary misunderstandings." Musian stood up and prepared to leave. At this time, the princess suddenly reached out and grabbed the corner of his clothes. "Wait." Musian stood still. The princess raised her head, as if she had made up her mind, and said, "This matter involves a secret of Yunzhou, so Master Mu must promise not to disclose it to a third person." "What secret is so serious?" Musian nodded slightly. "Please tell me, your highness." The princess seemed to have a little more sorrow between her eyebrows, and said softly, "I told you today that in my understanding, Yunzhou is closest to the heavenly court instead of the heavenly Dao, right? Do you know why I think so?" She slowly stood up and walked to the front door of the side hall, looking up at the dark sky. "Mr. Mu can try to absorb the spiritual energy here." Musian was a little doubtful, closed his eyes slightly, and tried to absorb the spiritual energy between heaven and earth into the furnace. After running a small cycle, he successfully absorbed the spiritual energy into the furnace. It seems that there is nothing special about it. When Musian just thought of this, his thoughts suddenly stopped. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at the princess in disbelief. He saw this peerless beauty with a bit of sarcasm in her eyes at this moment, and said quietly, "You guessed right, everything in Yunzhou is being eroded by the heavenly Dao, and even the spiritual energy of Yunzhou is directly supplied from the heavenly Dao. Somewhat wonderful, the spiritual energy in Yunzhou is different from anywhere in Zhuzhou. There seems to be a trace of the traces left by the heavenly Dao in the spiritual energy here," Musian said. "Before I merged with the Dao, the spiritual energy in Yunzhou was different from now, but now the spiritual energy of the Dao is almost covering the entire Yunzhou." The princess said, "If Yunzhou is really the place closest to the Dao of heaven, why would the Dao of heaven erode Yunzhou? The purpose of eroding Yunzhou is to make the local cultivators believe in the Dao of heaven, but the purpose of doing so is unknown." Musian was silent for a moment and asked, "So what do you say about the relationship with the Tiansheng furnace?" He couldn't actively use the spiritual energy of the Tiansheng furnace, so he could only give it passively. Even if he knew that the Dao of heaven was eroding Yunzhou, it seemed that there was nothing he could do. The princess shook her head slowly. "I just thought, if you get it back from the heavenly palace every time you lose your spiritual energy, then maybe you can find the location of the heavenly palace in this way." "What exactly does your highness want to do in the heavenly palace? To ascend to heaven, or, do you have other purposes?" Musian asked. "The rules of heaven and earth do not allow the great masters of the Hedao to ascend to heaven, and I have no such idea for the time being." The princess said softly, "Compared to the unrealistic thing of ascending to heaven, I would rather hope to find the whereabouts of the heavenly court. Maybe, I can find a way to counter the erosion of the heavenly Dao there, or if I can find the lord of the heavenly court, maybe I can find the answer from him. I think he should have no way." Musian's expression was subtle. The princess frowned slightly, and although her voice was gentle, there was a bit of instruction in her tone. "The heavenly court can jump out of the world and is not even affected by the heavenly Dao, which is enough to explain the means of the lord of the heavenly court. Don't be too absolute in everything." Musian was silent for a long time and didn't speak. The princess probably thought that Musian was hit by what she said just now, and her tone softened a bit, saying, "But you don't have to belittle yourself. With your talent and the support of the Green Emperor, it is not impossible for you to resonate with the Tao and enter the state of harmony with the Tao in the future. Muzian nodded humbly and replied, I will keep in mind the teachings of Her Royal Highness the Princess, but the matter of the spiritual energy in the heavenly court involves too many secrets. You are a friend trusted by His Majesty Luotan, and I naturally believe in you. It's just that if I want to enter the heavenly court, I may have to pay a certain price. I know, I have been prepared from the beginning. The princess nodded. She knew that everything has a price, not to mention that she wanted to go to the heavenly court. Since entering the world of cultivation, the only two goals of cultivators are to achieve harmony with the Tao and to ascend to the heavenly court. Because it is rumored that cultivators who ascend to the heavenly court can live forever, and even the speed of cultivation in the heavenly court will be much faster than the outside world. And top powers like the princess know that this rumor is true. The heavenly palace does exist. However, unless the path to becoming an immortal is revealed, it is impossible to ascend to the heavenly palace no matter what. This is something that has long been deeply rooted in the hearts of cultivators. If you want to enter the heavenly palace without the right time, place, and people, even if you can do it, you will probably have to pay a heavy price. But in order to solve the problem of the erosion of the heavenly Dao, the only way the princess can think of is the heavenly palace. Muzian pondered for a moment and said, Your Highness, can you give me 2 or 3 more days to consider it? The princess felt a little disappointed in her heart, but she did not show it on her face. She nodded gently and said, Mr. Mu will be suspected if he leaves the banquet for too long. Let's go back earlier. When Muzian turned around and was about to leave, the princess suddenly called him, No matter what Mr. Mu decides in the end, I will give you Yunyan Lu after I find it. Muzian paused slightly, and then hummed softly. After leaving the side hall, Muzian looked up at the gradually dimming sky and couldn't help but chuckle. He originally came to Yunzhou to look for Yunyanliu, but he didn't expect that Yunyanliu had not been found yet, but he had gained a greater harvest. If what the princess said today is true, then she is indeed the enemy of the heavenly Dao. If she is not in harmony with the heavenly Dao, then she is his ally. In order to avoid suspicion, the princess deliberately staggered with Muzian for a while before returning to the dinner. Today, many ministers of Yunzhou brought their wives and daughters. They are all noble in Yunzhou, and their wives and daughters are naturally quite beautiful. However, with the princess's arrival, it seemed that all the women attending the banquet were eclipsed. Especially since she was wearing a dress made of nirvana silk today. The dress that Muzian carefully designed for the princess naturally fits her body very well. Although the material is a bit conservative and almost covers the princess's skin, the skin exposed to the air is white and translucent. The tight silver-white dress can hardly hide the proud figure. Her long curly hair is tied up in a bun at the back, and a strand of fine hair hangs down and gently rests on her shoulders, with a dignified demeanor. The pink and white veil on her face adds a bit of hazy beauty to her face, making people want to take off her veil to see what's inside. Even an old hand like Muzian can't help but secretly sigh at the princess's figure. Not only is her breast volume amazing, but most importantly, her dress and even her temperament reveal a full sense of wife, and her beautiful legs are wrapped in translucent white silk, adding a bit of sacred and inviolable feeling. The Qing Emperor is really thoughtful. This dress design matches the princess's appearance, which is really a perfect match. The wife of a minister in the audience looked at the scene with envy and couldn't help but admire it. After this, more ministers gave sincere praises, and the Daipen Emperor on the stage smiled even more. For the Lord of Yunzhou, even if he and the princess are not actually married, in the eyes of the cultivators outside, he and the princess are a good story. Both of them are in the realm of harmony, and his beloved concubine is even more beautiful. It's just a pity that after so many years, his beloved concubine is still too cold to him in private. If it weren't for this, Daipen Emperor wouldn't have been angry when he saw the princess and a male cultivator sitting in a pavilion chatting. But now the misunderstanding has been resolved. Muzian's Taoist partner is Fairy Yao Meng. With the strength and beauty of that fairy, How dare Muzian hide his private affairs with other women from her? Besides, his beloved concubine can't possibly look down on him. The singing and dancing were going on. At this time, the gentle voice of the princess suddenly came from the hall. I heard that when I was not in Yunzhou these few days, it seemed that many Sabbath apostles came to Yunzhou to collect luck. Have you sent people to confirm their movements? As soon as these words came out, the lively atmosphere seemed to be a little quiet. The ministers looked at each other, and seemed to see confusion in each other's eyes. Then, a minister raised his hand and bowed, saying, "Your Highness, the Sabbath matter was handled by Wenjun, but he was ill today and did not attend the banquet." Warm tips: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter report error or contact us at the bottom to let us know. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. The cultivator in the Return to Void realm is ill? Even if it is an excuse, you should find a better excuse, right? The princess' voice is still so gentle and smooth, but there is a little more coldness in her tone. After this, all the ministers dared not say a word. Seeing this, the great Pen Emperor could not help but laugh and said, "My beloved concubine, don't worry so much. With you and me in charge of Yunzhou, the Sabbath can't make any waves. As for the Sabbath apostles collecting luck, a little luck is actually dispensable for Yunzhou." The princess was silent for a moment, and then she opened her red lips and said, "But since the beginning of this life, Yunzhou's luck has been declining. Have you ever thought about the reason? Your Highness, there is actually no need to worry so much. Not to mention that there are two great masters in Yunzhou who are in charge of the Dao. Even if this matter is put aside, Yunzhou still has the blessing of the heavenly Dao," a minister in the audience said. "Indeed, with the blessing of the heavenly Dao, the luck may rebound after declining to a certain extent. After all, the heavenly Dao will protect Yunzhou in the dark." For a while, many ministers in the audience nodded slightly while talking to each other, as if they had enough confidence in the heavenly Dao. It's no wonder. They were born and raised under the protection of the heavenly Dao. Even the spiritual energy for cultivation is directly supplied by the heavenly Dao. The spiritual energy is much richer than other places. It can be said that Yunzhou is a blessed place favored by the heavenly Dao. Dapen Emperor also said, "My beloved concubine must be too worried. You have been busy with external affairs during this period. Just let me handle the Sabbath affairs. You can rest for a few days." The princess stopped talking. If Dapen Emperor really wanted to send someone to secretly determine the whereabouts of the Sabbath apostle, he should have dealt with it long ago in Yunzhou for such a long time, and it would not have dragged on until she spoke. "Everyone, drink slowly. I have some insights these days, so I will go back to practice in seclusion." She sighed in her heart, put down the wine glass, and after saying a few words, she gestured to the maid beside her and ordered, "Take Master Mu to the empty room to rest." Muzian looked at the figure of the princess leaving, and glanced at the subjects in the hall again, with a thoughtful look on his face. He nodded slightly, stood up, and was about to leave the hall under the guidance of the maid. At this time, a servant outside the hall suddenly hurried into the hall and said, Big things are not good. Why are you so panicked?" "What's wrong?" the minister on the side scolded. Dapen Emperor stared. "What's wrong? There is a part of the creatures in the north of Yunzhou that are inexplicably aging. There is a good news from there. It seems that the forbidden land of life is expanding from the north," the servant said hurriedly. "Forbidden land of life? We have always lived in peace with it in the past, why is it?" For a moment, the court officials attending the banquet all showed astonishment. "Don't worry, I will go and see it myself." Emperor Dapen opened his mouth to appease everyone and said with a smile, "It's not like I have never been to the forbidden land of life in the past. It would be better to say that the fairy medicine he got now was taken from the forbidden land of life. Since it wants to expand outward, I will personally go to the forbidden land of life and suppress it. It's night. The princess returned to the small courtyard where she lived, sat on the futon, closed her eyes slightly, and tried to keep her mood as calm as possible. However, when she thought about what happened in the past 1,000 years, she couldn't help but sigh. In the past, when Emperor Dapen was not a powerful man, he also focused on governing Yunzhou. At that time, the Dapen emperor did not believe in heaven, but only believed in himself. However, since the golden age of Kyushu began, the aura of heaven began to gradually erode Yunzhou's original aura, and Yunzhou became more and more prosperous. The aura in the furnaces of almost every monk was extremely powerful. At this time, the Dapen emperor gradually slackened off and began to focus all his energy on echoing and ascension. Since entering a new life in Kyushu, Emperor Dapen has spent a lot of human resources on exploring the forbidden areas of life and seeking elixirs. Even when the Sabbath came, he did not stop exploring. As a result, many monks in Yunzhou died in the forbidden life area of Yunzhou. However, every time, the princess was behind the scenes to fill in the loopholes, so everything was fine all the time. She went to see Luo Tan a few days ago. On the one hand, she wanted to see what Luo Tan thought of Yunzhou now, and on the other hand, she also wanted to meet this close friend. On the other hand, he wanted to see if Emperor Dapen would handle Yunzhou's affairs well during his time away from Yunzhou. As a result, he ignored even the Sabbath matters, and did not even bother to send someone to secretly follow the Sabbath apostles. This is a sign of arrogance and a sign that he doesn't take Yunzhou's affairs to heart. Emperor Dapen's current thoughts have been entirely focused on the fairy medicine he obtained. They didn't even pay attention to the fact that Tiandao has become more and more rampant in recent years and almost assimilated the entire Yunzhou. Indeed, heaven is protecting Yunzhou now, because Yunzhou is full of people who believe in it. But what will happen if one day more monks in Yunzhou believe in the authentic way or the human way? The princess sighed softly. Even though he already knew the character of Emperor Dapen, he was still disappointed by his inaction. At the moment, she has no good solution but to continue to maintain order in Yunzhou, until she finds the location of Heavenly Court, and then uses the spiritual energy of Heavenly Court to resist the erosion of Heavenly Dao. Dong dong. The princess was thinking about this when she suddenly heard a slight knock on the door. Your Highness, is it convenient for you to come in now? Musian, why is he here? She wanted to go back, but the princess still agreed to Musian's departure. Well, come in. Musian opened the door and saw the plump and beautiful princess sitting cross-legged on the futon. Her eyes were slightly closed, and her eyebrows were decorated with a bit of red, which made her beautiful face show off a bit of the charm that only a married woman can have. I intend to accept your previous proposal and assist you in going to heaven, Musian whispered. The princess opened her eyes suddenly and stared at him with burning eyes. Accident and surprise flashed in her beautiful eyes, her heart trembled slightly, and she could hardly suppress the joy in her heart. Why did you suddenly agree? The princess tried her best to keep herself calm and wanted to know what Musian's purpose was. I just saw your conversation with Emperor Dapen in the palace, and thinking about your efforts in Yunzhou over the years, I really couldn't bear it. Musian smiled. Does this count as sympathizing with me? The princess showed a self-deprecating smile. She never expected that a young monk would sympathize with her for being so powerful. Not sympathy, but respect. However, the next moment, Musian's answer was beyond the princess's expectation. Emperor Dapen is determined to become an immortal and ascend. All the ministers are immersed in the peace of mind of the blessing of heaven. Only one person is silently supporting the entire Yunzhou. Musian stared at the woman's beautiful veiled appearance and said softly, "That's why I respect you very much." The princess's eyes flashed, but for a moment she didn't know how to answer Musian. She didn't expect that a young monk who had just known her for a short time could understand her and support her. Besides, maybe I also have some admiration for you. Musian smiled self-deprecatingly. I know you may find this disdainful, but a woman who supports the entire Yunzo, with such a grace, I am afraid even a man will feel a little admiration for her. The princess was stunned for a moment and stared at Musian in disbelief. She didn't expect that this young man would be so courageous. He would dare to express his love to her even though he already had Qingdi as a Taoist companion and even had a close relationship with Luo Tan in private. Isn't this just a bit of playfulness? But she couldn't feel the slightest bit of hypocrisy in Musian's eyes or tone. It was pure and sincere love. Even from her fiancé Emperor Daipen, she had never felt such sincere love. Because Emperor Daipen pursues her because he simply likes her body and wants to use her body to try to communicate. At this moment, all kinds of emotions intertwined in the princess' heart. She wanted to rebuke Musian for his boldness and fickleness, but for some reason, she didn't feel angry. Instead, she was a little panicked. But after all, she was one of the rulers of Yunzhou. The princess quickly calmed down, raised her head, and was about to say something. At this time, Musian put his index finger in front of his lips, with a sunny smile on his face, and said, "You don't have to give me an answer so soon, because before that, I will help you enter the heaven. But it may offend you." The princess has not yet recovered from Musian's bold confession just now, but just asked in a trance, "What offense?" Before the voice fell, Musian took 2 steps to the princess, and then a hand suddenly covered her eyes. Then, Musian, through the veil, occupied the princess's delicate red lips in the dim light. The princess' eyes were a little dazed, and she seemed to have not reacted yet. Only when she felt the boy's warm breath did she wake up, and immediately pushed away Musian's hand, staring at Musian with shame and anger. "Musian, you..." Then, before the princess could speak, she found that everything in front of her was no longer the original room. This world is filled with extremely rich spiritual energy. Where is this place? The princess looked around in disbelief, and she found that even the spiritual consciousness of the Hedeo realm could not confirm where this place was. "Since your highness has guessed where my heavenly spiritual energy comes from, has she never doubted whether I can enter the heaven?" At this time, Musian's voice suddenly sounded from behind, and also pulled the princess back to reality from her previous thoughts. She turned her head and saw the boy who appeared behind her at some point. At this moment, the thoughts in her mind flashed quickly like a fleeting light. Then, as if she realized something, the princess' heartbeat suddenly accelerated a few points. Is this the heaven? There is absolutely no mistake. The spiritual energy in this world is far more than that of Zhu by many times, and it is exactly the same as the spiritual energy of the heaven that she felt in Yunzhou. There is no doubt that this is the heaven. But the question is, why did she appear here? The scene of Musian kissing her lips through the veil quickly appeared in the princess' mind, and her pretty face blushed slightly. She stared at Musian, lowered her voice, and whispered, "Who are you?" The update is a little late, but it's only 7,000 words, close to 30,000 words, it seems to be okay, right? So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 515. Who are you? It is the spirit consciousness that appears in the heavenly palace, not the real body, right? Why can you bring my spirit consciousness into the heavenly palace? The princess stared at Musian's eyes, trying to get the answer she wanted from him. Musian shook his head gently, "I don't know the specific situation. At the beginning, I got a ring from the first generation of demon kings. From then on, the spirit consciousness can exist in the heavenly palace for a certain period of time, and it can also allow other people to enter the heavenly palace together." The first generation of demon king. The princess had obviously heard of the name of the first generation of demon kings, and there was some thought in her eyes. Then, she quickly thought of something important, her pretty face blushed, and a trace of resentment was revealed in her gentle eyes in the past. She glanced at Musian, is there any necessary connection between this and your kissing me just now? It seems that she is not used to saying that word. After hesitating for a long time, she asked in a low voice. Musian smiled and said, if you want to enter the heavenly palace, even if it is just a wisp of spiritual consciousness, you must have a certain amount of heavenly palace spiritual energy in your body, and I can only transfer the spiritual energy to you in this way. So that's how it is. No wonder you made such a bold move before. At this moment, the princess understood slightly in her heart and nodded silently. But while she was relieved, she didn't know why she felt inexplicably lost. When the little cultivator kissed her before, she was still surprised and angry, but now after listening to his explanation and understanding his motives, she felt a little lost. Am I looking forward to something? The princess had an idea that she thought was extremely absurd. As one of the rulers of Yunzhou and a princess who was born connected to the great Dao, the princess has never had any so-called surprises since she was born. Because the great Dao will favor her and she has good luck, she knew from birth that she would definitely enter the Hedao realm. Some people are born to work hard for cultivation, and the outcome is unknown. Some people are destined to be the Hedao Empress who will stand tall in the 9 provinces from the moment they are born. The princess is such a destined person. Because of this, there were many people who pursued the princess in the past. Some of them were greedy for her beauty, and some wanted to use her body to try to resonate with the Tao. Daipan Emperor was one of them. For this reason, Daipan Emperor had used countless methods to make the princess happy, but none of them worked. Because they were both in the Hedao realm, Daipan Emperor did not dare to make 2 extraordinary moves to avoid causing internal strife between the two. But who would have thought that after being kissed by Musian tonight, although the princess felt embarrassed, the embarrassment was not great. Instead, another strange and complex feeling arose in her heart. She was also somewhat unable to understand what she was thinking. The princess shook her head gently, dispelling the thoughts in her mind, but her heart seemed to have a feeling of worrying about gains and losses. Your Highness. At this time, Musian called her tentatively and said, are you going to go deep into the heavenly palace to take a look? The princess came back to her senses and showed a gentle smile. Then I'll trouble you, Master Mu. Musian shook his head. Since I have promised your Highness, I will naturally cooperate with you as much as possible. Then, he paused and said, but according to the rules of the heavenly palace, if you want to step into the heavenly palace, I am afraid you will need some more troublesome requirements. The princess was startled, looked at Musian, and asked, what requirements? For some reason, looking at Musian's sincere appearance, the princess inexplicably had a bad premonition in her heart. A place as sacred as the heavenly palace actually has such an unbearable rule. Who left this rule? After a while, the princess took off her coat, took off her veil, and walked on the floor of the heavenly palace with her white silk jade feet, with a faint blush on her face. Even though the princess was gentle and kind, she was full of resentment towards the person who wrote the heavenly court rules. The heavenly court that the monks pursued all their lives, its rules actually required others to wear skirts and stockings to enter. And they couldn't wear shoes. Is this rule true or false? Why can you ignore the rules and enter? The princess looked at the boy beside her and finally couldn't help but speak. Musian shook his head and guessed, maybe it's because I have the ring left by the first generation of Demon King. At this time, he couldn't admit that he was the author of the heavenly court rules. Even if it was a gentle beauty, if she knew the truth, she would probably tear Musian to pieces. Silence permeated between the two. After an unknown amount of time, Musian suddenly asked, how do you plan to use the spiritual energy of the heavenly palace? The princess did not answer, but asked a seemingly irrelevant question, Mr. Mu, have you ever heard of the 9 forbidden places in Zhuzhou? Musian was startled and hesitated. According to the ancient books, the forbidden places seem to have not appeared in the world for tens of thousands of years, right? The princess shook her head gently. Except for Yuzhou and the two places in the northern border, the other forbidden places have been closed for more than tens of thousands of years. The reason why the forbidden places are called forbidden is not because there are ancient creatures in the Hedeo realm sitting in them, but because the rules of heaven and earth in each forbidden place are completely different, and they are all controlled by the ancient creatures in the forbidden places. Can the heavenly Deo allow forbidden creatures to rewrite the rules of heaven and earth? It has said. Musian was a little surprised. Mr. Mew, why don't you guess why the forbidden land of life would expand outward for no reason? The princess asked a question that made Musian fall into deep thought. Yes, the forbidden land of life has always been at peace with Yunzhou. Why would it expand outward for no reason? Isn't it afraid of being too high profile and being punished by the heavenly Deo? Your Highness, Princess means, is this the tacit consent of the heavenly Deo? Musian heard the meaning of the princess' words. Only the human emperor in the Yuhua realm can rewrite the rules of heaven and earth. The creatures in the forbidden land are also in harmony with the Deo, but the rules of heaven and earth in the forbidden land where they are completely different from the outside world, forming a world of their own. The princess' eyes revealed a hint of darkness. I have secretly investigated in the past. At the beginning, the scope of activities in each forbidden land in Juzhu was extremely wide, and even several states were controlled by the forbidden land. Musian was stunned. This statement could not be ignored. The forbidden land once had the grand occasion of controlling the entire state, but why did it shrink its scope later and choose to become its own world? Although I have never seen it with my own eyes, all the creatures in the forbidden land are injured. Maybe there was a war and someone suppressed the 9 forbidden lands. Seeing Musian silent, the princess knew what he was thinking at the moment and added another sentence. How is it possible? Musian almost blurted out. This is a bit too absurd. Without being affected by the rules of heaven, the Hedeo realm can exert the strength of the Yuhua realm. Can someone suppress the 9 taboos? The princess shook her head slowly and said softly, I didn't quite believe it at first, but when I stepped into the forbidden land of life later, I found that the creatures in the forbidden land of life were indeed injured. If the creatures in the forbidden land are really in the state of harmony, then the one who rewrote the rules of heaven and earth is probably not them, but another mastermind behind the scenes. Musian pondered for a long time, his eyes changed slightly, and said, is it the way of heaven? The rules between heaven and earth, even the way of heaven itself cannot completely change, but it can change a part, and then use the forbidden creatures as a medium to allow that small part of the rules of heaven and earth to expand outward. The purpose of doing this is to give oneself greater power. So, the erosion of the way of heaven in Yunzhou may be related to the previous expansion of the forbidden land of life. When the princess heard this, she secretly praised Musian's cleverness. I think so too, so I want to resist the erosion of the way of heaven through the spiritual energy of the heavenly court. What do you want to do? Musian asked. The princess showed a charming and gentle smile on her face, and said, I was born to be connected to the great Deo. If I want, I can copy everything I see. Although it is not as good as the rules and spiritual energy of the heavenly court, it is enough to resist the erosion of the heavenly Deo on Yunzhou and make the forbidden land of life retreat. As for the expansion of the forbidden land of life during this period, although the great Peng Emperor has not paid attention to Yunzhou in recent years, he will not tolerate the forbidden land to erode his territory bit by bit. If he delays for 2 or 3 days, he must be able to do it. Will he take the risk to resist the erosion of the rules of the forbidden land of life? Musian asked. No, but he will try his best, at least he will show that he is trying his best. The princess' tone was still gentle, but her eyes were a little cold. There are so many eyes watching Yunzhou. If he retreats easily, the monks will be disappointed in him, and then the power of faith will collapse, so he will try his best to create the appearance that he has tried his best. Musian was stunned for a moment. You really know him well. Understand? The princess pursed her sexy red lips, with a bit of sarcasm in her tone, and said, he has been like this since the past, so I naturally know what he will do. Although there are two people in power in Yunzhou, from the beginning of this life to the present, it is almost always the princess who handles all matters of Yunzhou. Daipan Emperor has been focusing on the path of seeking immortality and ascension since thousands of years ago. Yunzhou has been thriving in recent years, little did he know how much the princess has paid behind the scenes. Musian stopped talking, but looked at the beautiful woman with a bit of emotion. What's wrong? Seemingly feeling a little uncomfortable being stared at by Musian, the princess couldn't help but ask in a low voice. Nothing, I just thought that His Majesty Luo Tan has several confidants around him who can help share the pressure, but it seems that you have been the only one silently dealing with these troubles in Yunzhou. Musian smiled and said, sure enough, Your Highness is just like my guess, a person who looks gentle but is actually very strong in heart. The princess hummed softly. She has heard this kind of flattering words countless times, so naturally there is not much fluctuation in her heart. Musian looked around the vast scenery in the heaven and continued, but in fact, you can also try to share your troubles with others like today, maybe the trouble will be solved soon. This time is just an accident, if it weren't for the fact that Mu Xiao happened to be a natural furnace, and happened to have a spell that could allow spiritual consciousness to escape into the heaven, it would be useless even if I confided in you. Maybe it would cause you trouble instead. The princess shook her head gently. She didn't want to bring her troubles to other people, but this time she really had no choice. Although she hesitated for a long time, she finally asked Musian for his help. What if I don't mind? Musian asked. The princess was slightly stunned and looked at Musian in disbelief. Is there anyone who doesn't mind trouble coming to the door? Musian couldn't help but laugh. Of course, no one likes trouble coming to the door. He stared at the princess's beautiful eyes as gentle as autumn water, and whispered, but if it's you, I don't mind. Dong dong. At this moment, the princess's eyes suddenly widened a little, and Musian's figure was reflected in her eyes, and her mind was in a mess. The princess has heard too many words like confession. As a princess who was born to be connected to the Avenue, the fastest and most convenient way to contact the Avenue is to become a Taoist partner with the princess. Using her as a medium, being intimate with her, naturally communicate with the Avenue. Because of this, the princess never paid attention to other people's confessions. Anyway, they either covet her body or come for the Avenue behind her. But Musian is just a little cultivator in the Return to Void realm, he can't think so much. Maybe he does covet her body, but that's because he likes her as a person, not the Avenue behind her. Besides, his confession just now was not a love talk, but more like a statement of a fact. But it is precisely such a calm statement of a fact that is the most touching. However, before the princess came back to her senses, Musian's eyes soon dimmed, lowered his head with some sadness, and said softly, but don't worry, no matter what, in the eyes of Yunzhou cultivators, you are the wife of Daipan Emperor, I won't make it difficult for you. I just hope that after a few years, I hope you will still remember that there was a little cultivator who secretly admired you. He raised his head and showed a well-behaved smile like the sun. Although he and I are husband and wife, we are not husband and wife in reality. The princess didn't know why she had to explain this, she just said it for no reason. Musian was surprised at first, then sighed, in the past, you have silently paid so much for Yunzhou, but Daipan Emperor took almost all the credit for himself. It's really a bit too much. If you were my Taoist partner, I would probably want to hold you in my hands and take good care of you, instead of arguing with you like I have in the past 2 days, and even throwing all the big and small things in Yunzhou to you to do. The princess was silent. Musian smiled bitterly, sorry, after all, this is a family affair between you and Daipan Emperor. As an outsider, it seems inappropriate for you to talk too much about this matter. It doesn't matter. You are someone Luo Tan trusts, and you are also half of our own. There is no need to be so polite. The princess' mood was complicated. After hearing Musian's words, She couldn't help but feel a little warmer in her heart. The depression caused by the inaction of the officials of Yunzhou also dissipated a little. Musian's words were like a warm current, flowing slowly in her body, which made her feel more comforted. If this person was not the Taoist partner of the Green Emperor, maybe she would really get close to him for no reason, right? The princess suddenly thought. After all, Musian is the only man who understands her so far. He is also gentle and handsome. And, the beauty of the spiritual energy of the heavenly palace, after experiencing it once, people will want to experience it again. Musian looked at the princess who was in a trance. He took 2 steps forward and gently embraced the beautiful and sexy woman in his arms. The warm breath made the princess' eyes slightly clear, until she felt a strange hand around her waist. The princess suddenly woke up and gently pushed Musian away. She tried to keep herself calm, but when she saw Musian's worried look, she couldn't help but feel a little bit reluctant in her heart. In short, let's go in first. No matter what happens, it's better to wait until the erosion of the heavenly Dao is resolved before we talk about it. Musian looked at her with a complicated look, forced a smile, and said, well, yes, the matter of Yunzhou is more important. Let's go, I'll take you into the depths of the heavenly palace. The princess bit her lip lightly, looked at the boy's slightly lonely and desolate back with a complicated look, but she didn't speak for a long time. The Great Peng Emperor, the original body, is an ancient race in the northern border, named Kunpeng. In the past, there were some vague records in the history books of Zhuzhou, describing the huge size of the Kunpeng in the northern border. This race is too powerful, but perhaps because of this, the number of Kunpeng is extremely small, and it is difficult to reproduce. However, every Kunpeng is born with amazing combat power, and the Great Peng Emperor is the best among them. Even though he has been immersed in the ascension of feathers in recent years, the combat power of creatures like Kunpeng should not be underestimated. On that day, the Great Peng Emperor personally went to the north of Yunzhou to suppress the Forbidden Land. The Forbidden Land of Life is actually a part of Yunzhou, but the rules in the Forbidden Land of Life are different from the rules of the outside world, so the powerful people in Zhuzhou are a little afraid of the Forbidden Land. Even the Great Peng Emperor did not dare to set foot in it easily, but only urged the immortal law to attack outside to resist the progress of the rules of the Forbidden Land of Life from encroaching outside. But just as the princess expected, although it was impossible to prevent the spread of the rules of the forbidden area of life, it was not difficult to delay it for a few days. After all, there are so many pairs of eyes in Yunzhou looking at him right now. If he just retreats hastily, the monks in Yunzhou will be disappointed in him. In this way, the power of faith gathered in Yunzhou will also dissipate. This is something that Emperor Daipen cannot accept. However, even the Daipen Emperor was completely powerless to do anything about the power of rules in the Forbidden Land of Life. He could only delay it as long as possible, and then watched helplessly as the power of rules emanating from the Forbidden Land of Life quietly expanded outwards and filled the air. In the blink of an eye, 3 days like this passed. On this night, Emperor Daipen stared closely at the mysterious grey mist pouring out of the Forbidden Land of Life, frowning, feeling powerless in his heart, not knowing how to resist the power of this rule. However, at this moment, he unexpectedly discovered that the grey mist containing the power of rules was shrinking back inexplicably, as if it was fearing something. The rules in the Forbidden Land of Life are actively retreating. Emperor Daipen looked at the scene with his eyes flickering and wondering. After a while, dazzling golden light emitted from his body. His aura was extremely powerful, and he continued to kill towards the Forbidden Land of Life. Although I don't know the reason, this is a great opportunity to counterattack, and it is also an opportunity for the Yunzhou monks to believe in him even more. During this battle, people could only see the dazzling golden light flashing in the north of Yunzhou, but they did not realize that in this world, there seemed to be a spiritual energy different from Kyushu that was dispelling the erosion of heavenly Dao over the years. And 5 days later, the power of the rules of the life forbidden land completely shrunk back to its original scope. Some of the monks in Yunzhou admired the power of their lord of Yunzhou, but only the northern monks who were present at the time knew that this time the Daipen Emperor seemed to be in full battle with the forbidden land of life, but in fact, the forbidden land of life, it seems that it was not because of the Daipen Emperor that he faded away, but because he was afraid of some mysteries. It was because the princess spent a lot of energy to copy the aura of heaven. Only then did she resist the erosion of the law of heaven in the underworld and let the power of the rules of the forbidden land of life retreat temporarily. In the afternoon of the day when the forbidden land of life retreated, Emperor Daipen successfully returned to the palace in triumph. The ministers had already been waiting outside the palace, cheering to welcome the return of the Lord of Yunzhou. Emperor Daipen was enjoying the praises of the ministers, and in the midst of this lively voice, a minister suddenly asked in confusion, "By the way, why don't you see Her Royal Highness the Princess today?" After repelling the forbidden area of life, Emperor Daipen was obviously in a good mood and said with a smile, "My beloved concubine is in retreat in the palace today. She said that she has gained some insights recently. Ministers, don't worry about it." He paused and continued, "I defeated the forbidden area of life today, so I should celebrate it. When the celebration is over, I will go and see how the situation is at my beloved concubine's place." All the ministers looked at each other and immediately raised their hands to bow. The Emperor Daipen is wise. In a certain courtyard of the palace, Musian sat in front of the windowsill and looked at the spring scene in the courtyard outside the windowsill. He couldn't help but admired, the area is so deserted today. It seems that everyone has gone to welcome the Daipen Emperor after his return. Repelling the forbidden area of life and allowing Yunzhou to save the day will naturally be praised. The princess walked to the windowsill wearing a pair of exquisite and small silver white embroidered shoes, and looked up out of the window. Even though she was in a quiet place, she could still vaguely feel the excitement in the palace. "But I'm afraid they don't know that the real hero this time is not Emperor Daipen, but you." The princess looked at Musian tenderly, with sincere gratitude in her eyes. "If it hadn't been for you this time, Yunzhou would have really suffered a disaster." I said, "As long as I can help you." Musian shook his head and smiled. "Besides, I just took you to heaven, and what happens after that has nothing to do with me." Musian paused for a moment. "Your Highness, it is clearly your fault this time. Are you really planning to give all the credit to Emperor Daipen?" The princess smiled lightly and said, "I have no interest in publicity. Peace in Yunzhou is enough." Musian frowned and said, "But Emperor Daipen doesn't know about this either. Does he think you did nothing this time?" After Musian finished speaking, he suddenly realized something and quickly added, "I'm sorry, this doesn't seem to be something I should interrupt." I said, "You no longer need to regard yourself as an outsider." The princess looked at Musian quietly with gentle eyebrows and said in a soft tone, "Even Luo Tan might not know such an important secret of heavenly court, but Musian was willing to tell her such an important secret in order to help her. This alone was enough for her to trust Musian. After all, heavenly court is involved in the matter of ascension. If the person who knows this is a wicked person, then Musianki will be in danger. Although it is not appropriate for me to say this, I still want to give you a reminder, no matter what, do not expose the secrets of heaven to outsiders easily, otherwise it will bring you great trouble." The princess said, sincerely persuaded. Musian smiled, "I know, and I won't disclose this to others casually." He paused for a moment, with a hint of worry in his tone. "Compared with my affairs, I'm still more worried about you. Although Her Royal Highness the Princess is broad-minded and doesn't care about her contribution to saving Yunzhou, but I don't know that in Emperor Daipen's heart. What would you think?" The princess was silent for a moment. Musian's words could be said to have hit a painful spot in her heart. Similar things had happened in the past. It was obvious that she had solved the problem, but the uninformed Emperor Daipen thought that she had done nothing, and even caused many unpleasant things because of it. "Let's end this matter." The princess sighed softly, and then she took out a wicker that exuded a faint cloud of smoke from under her wide sleeve and handed it to Musian. "This is the union willow that I asked someone to find in the past few days. It's better not to get too involved in Yunzo's affairs, little friend Mew, so as not to get burned. After refining this union willow, I will send you back to Yuzhou. After this, I believe that with Luo Tan's help, you should be able to achieve enlightenment smoothly soon." The princess looked at Musian with complicated eyes. A few days ago, she had a lot of hostility towards Musian, thinking that this man was coveting Luo Tan's natural cauldron, so she deliberately approached Luo Tan. But now, her view of Musian has completely changed. Although he is a little carefree, he still treats women with care and sincerity. However, he already has the Taoist companion Qingdi by his side, and she is the nominal wife of Emperor Daipen, so there is no way she could be involved with Musian. I sent him back to Yuzhou this time. Maybe the next time we meet will be thousands of years later. The princess looked at Musian silently, her mind filled with thoughts. Musian looked at the Yunyanliu in the princess's hand and suddenly sighed. "What's wrong? Do you have any other worries?" the princess asked softly. She wanted to see if there was anything else she could do to help Musian before bidding her final farewell. "With the help of His Majesty Luo Tan, I think I can indeed enter the realm of enlightenment very quickly." Musian smiled mockingly to himself, "But after I realize the Tao, what kind of Tao rhyme should I understand?" The princess was slightly startled, then fell silent. Indeed, what Musian was talking about was a very real issue. To put it bluntly, the state of enlightenment is to choose one of the three paths of heaven, earth, and man and understand its charm. It can be said that the enlightenment realm is the foundation of the Hedao realm. After choosing one of the Tao rhymes after the enlightenment realm, it is impossible to change the Hedao realm. This was an important turning point for the monk. Under normal circumstances, most monks would choose the way of heaven. Because, throughout the ages, the heavenly way has always been the most powerful, while the earthly way and the human way are slightly inferior. But the princess who knew some of the secrets of heavenly Dao knew very well that heavenly Dao was in trouble now, and she must not use it as a choice for enlightenment. Otherwise, I am afraid that there is a possibility of becoming a puppet controlled by heaven in the future. So besides that, what else can Musian choose? Is it authentic or humane? It's not impossible, but it's not the best after all. At least, she can give Musian a better choice. It's just that this method has some. The princess bit her delicate red lips and looked at Musian with eyes filled with confusion. She is the princess of Yunzhou, and Musian also has a Taoist companion. If he were really allowed to come into contact with Dao in that way, it would probably be despised by everyone who knew about it. Moreover, she just rejected Musian's expression of love a few days ago. If she opens her mouth again now, it would be really hard to say. Anyway, thank you Princess Yunyanliu this time, and thank you for chatting with me in heaven these days. Mew, I won't disturb your future life. Musian showed a wry smile. He looked up at the princess and said softly, "After all, because of my incident, your relationship with Emperor Daipen has probably deteriorated much more than before. In the past few days, the princess has been secretly using the power of heaven almost every day to resist the erosion of heaven and make the forbidden land of life retreat. But Emperor Daipen thought that the princess had done nothing during this period, so he would naturally be dissatisfied with his fiancée. But who would have thought that she would be the one paying the biggest price this time? Your Highness, take care of yourself." Seeing that the princess was silent, Musian said one last word, then turned around and planned to leave the room. The princess' slender hand subconsciously grasped the hem of her skirt, her beautiful eyes full of complexity. She realized that after Musian left this time, it would probably be like two parallel lines, and it would be difficult to have any intersection with her again. Is this really what she wants? I don't know since when. The complex expression in the princess's beautiful eyes gradually calmed down. Actually, It is not necessary to understand the three realms of heaven, earth, and man to achieve enlightenment. Just as Musian was taking steps forward, a gentle, calm and sweet voice suddenly came from behind him. The princess stood behind her, looking at him a little shyly, but there was a look of relief in her beautiful eyes. Musian paused slightly, slowly turned his head and looked around, and asked in surprise, "What did Her Majesty the Princess mean just now?" He saw this beautiful wife who was always gentle, walking towards him with gentle steps. "I have a way for you to understand the charm of Tao that is different from the three realms of heaven, earth, and man." The princess came to Musian, raised her head and stared at his weak and handsome face, and said softly. Musian's eyes were filled with doubt, but the princess suddenly asked a question that seemed to have nothing to do with the matter. "I know you often secretly spied on my body before." She tilted her head, a strand of hair slipped down from her ear, and asked softly, "Do you miss me?" Musian was silent for a while. He didn't expect the princess to ask such an unexpected question. "It's impossible to say that I don't miss it. But this answer, isn't it a bit too direct? Is she testing me?" At this time, Musian's mind was turning quickly, secretly thinking about how to answer to please the princess. However, what Musian didn't expect was that the princess said again at this time, "In fact, it is not difficult to comprehend the fourth kind of Tao rhyme, but it requires your cooperation." How to cooperate? For some reason, Musian's heartbeat inexplicably accelerated a few points. The method is actually very simple. The princess gently took off her veil, stared at Musian's eyes with her gentle and beautiful eyes, and stood on tiptoe. She gently placed one hand on Musian's shoulder, and then whispered in his ear with a soft voice that seemed to melt a man's heart, "Be with me. Then, let's do something together that will make King D feel sorry." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 516. Repulsing the Forbidden Land of Life was a major event that could shake Yunzhou. This great victory also made the great Peng Emperor in a very good mood, and the entire palace cheered. The Forbidden Land of Life is known as one of the 9 forbidden places. The rules and order there are different from any place in Zhuzhou. Anyone who sets foot in it, even if they are in the Hedao realm, is at risk of being injured or even falling. When the rules of the Forbidden Land of Life spread outward this time, they were suppressed by the Lord of Yunzhou. Such strength is undoubtedly like a dose of heart tonic, which makes the palace and even the cultivators in Yunzhou cheer and celebrate. Because of this, on the day when the great Peng Emperor successfully returned, he let the palace celebrate this victory together, and took this opportunity to let the ministers know that in Yunzhou, there is only one real power holder. At this moment, in the Yunzhou Palace, many magnificent palaces are located, and ancient towering trees are in clusters, with branches and leaves emitting extraordinary brilliance, which is extremely gorgeous. Many subjects with strong inner auras are celebrating this victory. It's strange to say, we had no connection with the Forbidden Land of Life in the past, but why did they offend our Yunzhou territory for no reason this time? At this time, a minister suddenly said a common doubt in everyone's mind. Indeed, this matter is quite strange. The Forbidden Land of Life has always been at peace with Yunzhou, but this time they want to expand the forbidden area. It's incredible, an old woman said, and there seemed to be a faint golden light flowing in her eyes, and she was shrouded in divine light. The great Peng Emperor was in the first place, wearing a black and gold battle armor. He looked around at everyone and said slowly, "I have sent people to investigate this matter secretly. The Forbidden Land of Life has retreated now. There will be no movement in the short term. You don't have to worry. If there is any news, I will send someone to discuss with you as soon as possible." Everyone heard this and expressed their opinions. "We are relieved with the words of the great Peng Emperor." At this time, Another person next to him suddenly asked, I don't know how the princess is doing now. When the forbidden land of life invaded Yunzhou this time, she didn't seem to show up. Could it be that she has touched the perception of ejaculation? The great Peng Emperor shook his head and smiled. How can it be so easy to ejaculate and ascend to heaven? But since you all care so much about my beloved concubine, I will visit her in person after the dinner is over later. As for now. The great Peng Emperor looked around at the monks and raised his wine glass. All the ministers have worked hard this time. Tonight, I will not go home until I am drunk with you all. When the words fell, the wine glasses collided and the wine splashed. At the same time, in a quiet courtyard in the palace, the gentle and sexy princess put one hand on Musian's shoulder, and her gentle voice seemed to be full of infinite charm, lingering in Musian's ears. It also made him dazed for a while. In this dim room, the two of them stared at each other. The beauty in silver white clothes and a sexy and mature figure like a peach was looking at Musian with a pair of affectionate eyes. It seemed that he could vaguely smell the sweet fragrance wafting from her dress. Such a fragrance is no less than any delicious wine. Just a slight sniff will make people intoxicated. Your Highness, what did you mean just now? It was not until a long time later that Musian woke up from his previous trance, calmed down a little, and asked. For some reason, he had a vague premonition in his heart. The princess did not answer directly. She opened her sexy and seductive red lips slightly and asked a seemingly irrelevant question, do you know why so many people secretly pursued me? Even Dapen Emperor had not married for thousands of years for this princess, hoping to make it a done deal. It was not just to become a loving couple in the eyes of the world, but to become a true Taoist partner with the princess. Because of the princess's beauty, right? Musian asked. You are so slick and you can make girls happy. The princess gave him a glare. It should be said that she is really a gentle wife. Even a glaring look is like a girl's coquettishness, full of infinite charm. Junior really doesn't know, if it's not because of your beauty, then what is it for? Musian showed a helpless look, his eyes full of sincerity. The great way the princess did not keep the secret and told a secret. She clasped her hands gently in front of her soft and upright chest, and whispered, I was born connected to the great Dao. Those who know this secret all guess that they may be able to communicate with the great Dao through me. Do you know the relationship between the great Dao and the three Daos of heaven, earth, and man? Musian shook his head and asked humbly, please tell me, Your Highness. The three Daos of heaven, earth, and man are the inevitable choices for all cultivators in the end. After choosing one of the Daos to resonate, you can achieve the state of unity with the Dao. But in addition to this, there is another Dao that is above all things in the universe and never interferes with the fights between cultivators. Unless someone does something that threatens to destroy the universe, it will not end. The princess stared into Musian's eyes and whispered, what I'm talking about is the great Dao. The ancients often said that the great Dao is ruthless. Musian could not understand its meaning in the past. Now, after listening to the princess's explanation, his heart suddenly became clear. In short, the three Daos of heaven, earth, and man jointly formulated the rules of heaven and earth that restrict cultivators. Because there are all living things, there are the three Daos of heaven, earth, and man. And the Tao, as long as the universe does not perish, the Tao will never disappear. If the three ways of heaven, earth, and man exist because of all living things, then the great Dao exists because of the universe. The great Dao emphasizes following nature. Every tens of thousands of years, a creature that can be related to it may be born. You should have heard of the Linglong of Lianji sect, right? I have heard of it, my wife. Musian nodded reservedly. Senior Linglong is in my sect, and I have indeed heard of her. My situation is similar to hers, said the princess, but she is a creature loved by the great Dao, and I was born connected to the great Dao. So what you said, what is the connection with Sister Kingdi? Musian hesitated. The princess raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at him silently. Does he really not understand, or is he pretending not to understand? It has been hinted so clearly, doesn't he understand what he means? The princess's beautiful eyes flickered, and she was about to speak. At this time, Musian looked as if he had suddenly realized something, and asked in surprise, "Could it be that you can help other people communicate with the Great Deo?" "I can help you connect with the Great Deo, but whether you can get the Great Deo's recognition depends on your own luck." When the princess said this, there was a little more regret in her tone, and she said softly, "The Great Deo has a natural liking for the son of luck. It's a pity that Linglong has been in seclusion in Lianji sect for thousands of years because of the fire of karma. Otherwise, if you can get her luck blessing, I believe that if you want to use the Great Deo as a choice for enlightenment in the future, it will not reject you. You have to try to know, how can I connect with the Great Deo?" Musian asked. "I just said that the method is actually very simple, but, maybe I will let down the Green Emperor." The princess's eyes fell on Musian intentionally or unintentionally, and her beautiful eyes were gentle and lovely. "Can I try it now?" Musian asked. The princess showed an all-embracing smile on her face and said softly, "If you want, you can. Close your eyes." "Oh my God, are we really going to be in the palace? This is too exciting, isn't it?" Musian noticed the tenderness hidden deep in the woman's eyes and realized that she didn't seem to be joking, and his heart couldn't help but jump slightly. "Your Highness, how about waiting until we return to Yizhou?" Before Musian finished speaking, the princess gently covered Musian's eyes with the veil in her hand. At the moment he lost his vision, the soft red lips gently pressed on his lips. The slightly cool touch almost made Musian's brain crash slightly at that moment. He never expected that this princess, who was always reserved and gentle, would actually be in the palace of Daipen Emperor with him. "By the way, why did you cover my eyes? Could it be that you are worried that I would see her shy look?" Musian thought. But soon, he slowly immersed himself in this excitement, gently hugged the princess's plump and soft waist with both hands, and held the woman in his arms. The princess's delicate body trembled slightly, and she was originally shy in her heart. However, for some reason, she smelled the warm breath of the boy and heard the faint congratulations of the palace officials in her ears, accompanied by an indescribable sense of excitement. She loosened the veil that originally covered Musian's eyes, hugged Musian's neck tightly with both hands, closed her eyes slightly, and showed an intoxicated look on her face. Musian lowered his head slightly, looking at the shy blush on the face of the beauty in his arms. His heart couldn't help but ripple slightly, and he hugged her in his arms more eagerly, enjoying this ambiguous atmosphere. Boom! After an unknown period of time, Musian suddenly heard a thunder rumble in his head. Musian's eyes were dark. Then, a white light quietly split the darkness. Musian found that the room that appeared in his vision was no longer the original room. He seemed to be in the starry sky of the universe. For no reason, an inexplicable arose in Musian's heart. The Great Deo. I actually saw the Great Deo. Musian's heart was full of surprise. He looked around and found that he was indeed in the universe. There is no doubt that the Great Deo is in this universe, but it is invisible and intangible. However, it can be felt in the dark. No wonder the great Pen Emperor is so obsessed with the princess. It is probably not only because of her beauty, but also because of her body, or in other words, it is her constitution that is connected to the Great Deo from birth. However, his spiritual consciousness that appeared here is very ethereal and weak, and it is probably not enough for him to stay here for a long time. Just kissing the princess can see the Great Deo. What if he takes a step further with her? Even Musian couldn't help but feel a little moved when he thought of these possibilities. At this moment, Musian suddenly heard the gentle and pleasant voice of the princess. In a trance, he found that his consciousness had returned to the room without knowing when. The princess nestled in his arms, slightly closed her eyes, and seemed to be immersed in the joy just now. The room fell into a brief silence, and it seemed that the cheers from the celebration banquet next door could be heard. After a while, the princess slowly opened her beautiful and moist eyes, gazed at him gently, and whispered, "Do you understand now?" Musian was silent for a while and nodded gently. "Aren't you worried that I'm also here for the avenue?" he suddenly asked. The princess just smiled gently and shook her head, saying, "You won't." She slowly stroked Musian's handsome face and said, "Your eyes, and even your body, won't lie to me." That's right, Musian was indeed a little surprised and even jealous when he saw the avenue now. After all, this was related to whether he could comprehend the avenue in his enlightenment state. However, just after leaving the avenue, Musian's attention was immediately attracted by the beautiful woman in his arms. Bang! Suddenly, a firework bloomed outside the house in the night, as if the celebration banquet had come to an end. The princess's beautiful face was illuminated by the fireworks, bright and moving. "Want to experience it again?" the princess suddenly asked softly. Musian was stunned. She showed a charming smile, leaned over Musian's ear, and whispered in a sweet and sexy voice, "Then just think of me now, indulge in me, and then hide your kingly sister with me." Hearing this sweet voice that was so gentle that it seemed to overflow with water, Musian's heart couldn't help but ripple slightly, and he hugged the princess's slender waist. However, before he could make any more moves, the princess suddenly raised her index finger and made a hush gesture to Musian. Before Musian could react, he heard the princess say in her usual gentle and calm tone, "What's the matter with you, Dapen Emperor?" "Dapen Emperor? Dapen Emperor is coming." Musian was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately reacted and subconsciously blocked his breath. But then, he noticed the formation in the house, smiled self-deprecatingly, and removed the originally hidden breath. The princess is the daughter of the great Deo. As long as people outside do not deliberately use their spiritual sense to search the house, they will not be able to sense the formation she has set up. In the middle of the night, there is actually a young monk spending the night with her in the princess's house. I heard that my beloved concubine seems to have new insights these days. Could it be that she has already touched the way of Yahweh realm? Hearing the voice coming from outside the house, the princess just winked at Musian playfully. "I do have some insights, otherwise I would not have been in seclusion these days. It's because this matter has caused you a lot of trouble," she answered in her usual gentle voice. "I have suppressed the forbidden land of life. My beloved concubine does not need to worry." "But how did you realize the way of Yahweh?" Dapen Emperor finally asked the question he cared about the most. "Well, I happened to absorb some spiritual energy from the heavenly court in Yuzhou a few days ago, so I have some insights," the princess said. "I see." The man outside nodded thoughtfully. "When will my beloved wife send someone to send Musian back? It's not like he hasn't come into contact with the spiritual energy of the heavenly court before. If he could ascend to heaven with just that little spiritual energy of the heavenly court, he would have already ascended to heaven long ago, and there would be no need to risk going to the forbidden land of life to find the elixir." The princess looked at Musian seductively, tiptoed slightly, and kissed him lightly on the face. Then, a charming smile appeared on her face. "I have found Union Lu, and I will have someone take care of Musian. If there is nothing else, you go ahead and get busy. Please give me some votes. There are so many updates in the past 2 days." Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to let us know. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 517. Repulsing the forbidden land of life was a major event that could shake Yunzhou. This great victory also made the great Peng Emperor in a very good mood, and the entire palace cheered. The forbidden land of life is known as one of the 9 forbidden places. The rules and order there are different from any place in Zhuzhou. Anyone who sets foot in it, even if they are in the Hedeo realm, is at risk of being injured or even falling. When the rules of the forbidden land of life spread outward this time, they were suppressed by the Lord of Yunzhou. Such strength is undoubtedly like a dose of heart tonic, which makes the palace and even the cultivators in Yunzhou cheer and celebrate. Because of this, on the day when the great Peng Emperor successfully returned, he let the palace celebrate this victory together, and took this opportunity to let the ministers know that in Yunzhou, there is only one real power holder. At this moment, in the Yunzhou Palace, many magnificent palaces are located, and ancient towering trees are in clusters, with branches and leaves emitting extraordinary brilliance, which is extremely gorgeous. Many subjects with strong inner auras are celebrating this victory. It's strange to say, we had no connection with the forbidden land of life in the past, but why did they offend our Yunzhou territory for no reason this time? At this time, a minister suddenly said a common doubt in everyone's mind. Indeed, this matter is quite strange. The forbidden land of life has always been at peace with Yunzhou, but this time they want to expand the forbidden area. It's incredible, an old woman said, and there seemed to be a faint golden light flowing in her eyes, and she was shrouded in divine light. The great Peng Emperor was in the first place, wearing a black and gold battle armor. He looked around at everyone and said slowly, "I have sent people to investigate this matter secretly. The forbidden land of life has retreated now. There will be no movement in the short term. You don't have to worry. If there is any news, I will send someone to discuss with you as soon as possible." Everyone heard this and expressed their opinions. We are relieved with the words of the great Peng Emperor. At this time, another person next to him suddenly asked, "I don't know how the princess is doing now. When the forbidden land of life invaded Yunzhou this time, she didn't seem to show up. Could it be that she has touched the perception of ejaculation?" The great Peng Emperor shook his head and smiled. "How can it be so easy to ejaculate and ascend to heaven? But since you all care so much about my beloved concubine, I will visit her in person after the dinner is over later. As for now..." The great Peng Emperor looked around at the monks and raised his wine glass. "All the ministers have worked hard this time. Tonight, I will not go home until I am drunk with you all." When the words fell, the wine glasses collided and the wine splashed. At the same time, in a quiet courtyard in the palace, the gentle and sexy princess put one hand on Musian's shoulder, and her gentle voice seemed to be full of infinite charm, lingering in Musian's ears. It also made him dazed for a while. In this dim room, the two of them stared at each other. The beauty in silver white clothes and a sexy and mature figure like a peach was looking at Musian with a pair of affectionate eyes. It seemed that he could vaguely smell the sweet fragrance wafting from her dress. Such a fragrance is no less than any delicious wine. Just a slight sniff will make people intoxicated. "Your Highness, what did you mean just now?" It was not until a long time later that Musian woke up from his previous trance, calmed down a little, and asked. For some reason, he had a vague premonition in his heart. The princess did not answer directly. She opened her sexy and seductive red lips slightly and asked a seemingly irrelevant question, "Do you know why so many people secretly pursued me?" Even Pen Emperor had not married for thousands of years for this princess, hoping to make it a done deal. It was not just to become a loving couple in the eyes of the world, but to become a true Taoist partner with the princess. Because of the princess's beauty, right? Musian asked. "You are so slick and you can make girls happy." The princess gave him a glare. It should be said that she is really a gentle wife. Even a glaring look is like a girl's coquettishness, full of infinite charm. Junior really doesn't know, if it's not because of your beauty, then what is it for? Musian showed a helpless look, his eyes full of sincerity. The great way the princess did not keep the secret and told a secret. She clasped her hands gently in front of her soft and upright chest, and whispered, "I was born connected to the great Dao. Those who know this secret all guess that they may be able to communicate with the great Dao through me. Do you know the relationship between the great Dao and the three Daos of heaven, earth, and man?" Muzian shook his head and asked humbly, "Please tell me, Your Highness. The three deos of heaven, earth, and man are the inevitable choices for all cultivators in the end. After choosing one of the deos to resonate, you can achieve the state of unity with the deo. But in addition to this, there is another deo that is above all things in the universe and never interferes with the fights between cultivators. Unless someone does something that threatens to destroy the universe, it will not end." The princess stared into Muzian's eyes and whispered, "What I'm talking about is the Great Deo. The ancients often said that the Great Deo is ruthless." Muzian could not understand its meaning in the past. Now, after listening to the princess's explanation, his heart suddenly became clear. In short, the three deos of heaven, earth, and man jointly formulated the rules of heaven and earth that restrict cultivators. Because there are all living things, there are the three deos of heaven, earth, and man. And the Tao, as long as the universe does not perish, the Tao will never disappear. If the three ways of heaven, earth, and man exist because of all living things, then the Great Deo exists because of the universe. The Great Deo emphasizes following nature. Every tens of thousands of years, a creature that can be related to it may be born. You should have heard of the Linglong of Lianji sect, right? I have heard of it, my wife. Muzian nodded reservedly. Senior Linglong is in my sect, and I have indeed heard of her. My situation is similar to hers, said the princess, but she is a creature loved by the Great Deo, and I was born connected to the Great Deo. So what you said, what is the connection with Sister Kingdi? Muzian hesitated. The princess raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at him silently. Does he really not understand, or is he pretending not to understand? It has been hinted so clearly, doesn't he understand what he means? The princess's beautiful eyes flickered, and she was about to speak. At this time, Muzian looked as if he had suddenly realized something, and asked in surprise, "Could it be that you can help other people communicate with the Great Deo?" "I can help you connect with the Great Deo, but whether you can get the Great Deo's recognition depends on your own luck." When the princess said this, there was a little more regret in her tone, and she said softly, "The Great Deo has a natural liking for the son of luck. It's a pity that Linglong has been in seclusion in Lianji sect for thousands of years because of the fire of karma. Otherwise, if you can get her luck blessing, I believe that if you want to use the Great Deo as a choice for enlightenment in the future, it will not reject you. You have to try to know, how can I connect with the Great Deo?" Muzian asked. "I just said that the method is actually very simple, but, maybe I will let down the Green Emperor." The princess's eyes fell on Muzian intentionally or unintentionally, and her beautiful eyes were gentle and lovely. "Can I try it now?" Muzian asked. The princess showed an all-embracing smile on her face and said softly, "If you want, you can. Close your eyes." "Oh my God, are we really going to be in the palace? This is too exciting, isn't it?" Muzian noticed the tenderness hidden deep in the woman's eyes and realized that she didn't seem to be joking, and his heart couldn't help but jump slightly. "Your Highness, how about waiting until we return to Yizhou?" Before Muzian finished speaking, the princess gently covered Muzian's eyes with the veil in her hand. At the moment he lost his vision, the soft red lips gently pressed on his lips. The slightly cool touch almost made Muzian's brain crash slightly at that moment. He never expected that this princess, who was always reserved and gentle, would actually be in the palace of Dapen Emperor with him. "By the way, why did you cover my eyes? Could it be that you are worried that I would see her shy look?" Muzian thought. But soon, he slowly immersed himself in this excitement, gently hugged the princess's plump and soft waist with both hands, and held the woman in his arms. The princess's delicate body trembled slightly, and she was originally shy in her heart. However, for some reason, she smelled the warm breath of the boy and heard the faint congratulations of the palace officials in her ears, accompanied by an indescribable sense of excitement. She loosened the veil that originally covered Muzian's eyes, hugged Muzian's neck tightly with both hands, closed her eyes slightly, and showed an intoxicated look on her face. Musian lowered his head slightly, looking at the shy blush on the face of the beauty in his arms. His heart couldn't help but ripple slightly, and he hugged her in his arms more eagerly, enjoying this ambiguous atmosphere. Boom! After an unknown period of time, Musian suddenly heard a thunder rumble in his head. Musian's eyes were dark. Then, a white light quietly split the darkness. Musian found that the room that appeared in his vision was no longer the original room. He seemed to be in the starry sky of the universe. For no reason, an inexplicable awe rose in Musian's heart. The Great Deo. I actually saw the Great Deo. Musian's heart was full of surprise. He looked around and found that he was indeed in the universe. There is no doubt that the Great Deo is in this universe, but it is invisible and intangible. However, it can be felt in the dark. No wonder the great Pen Emperor is so obsessed with the princess. It is probably not only because of her beauty, but also because of her body, or in other words, it is her constitution that is connected to the great Deo from birth. However, his spiritual consciousness that appeared here is very ethereal and weak, and it is probably not enough for him to stay here for a long time. Just kissing the princess can see the great Deo. What if he takes a step further with her? Even Musian couldn't help but feel a little moved when he thought of these possibilities. At this moment, Musian suddenly heard the gentle and pleasant voice of the princess. In a trance, he found that his consciousness had returned to the room without knowing when. The princess nestled in his arms, slightly closed her eyes, and seemed to be immersed in the joy just now. The room fell into a brief silence, and it seemed that the cheers from the celebration banquet next door could be heard. After a while, the princess slowly opened her beautiful and moist eyes, gazed at him gently, and whispered, "Do you understand now?" Musian was silent for a while and nodded gently. "Aren't you worried that I'm also here for the avenue?" he suddenly asked. The princess just smiled gently and shook her head, saying, "You won't." She slowly stroked Musian's handsome face and said, "Your eyes, and even your body, won't lie to me." That's right. Musian was indeed a little surprised and even jealous when he saw the avenue now. After all, this was related to whether he could comprehend the avenue in his enlightenment state. However, just after leaving the avenue, Musian's attention was immediately attracted by the beautiful woman in his arms. Bang! Suddenly, a firework bloomed outside the house in the night, as if the celebration banquet had come to an end. The princess's beautiful face was illuminated by the fireworks, bright and moving. "Want to experience it again?" the princess suddenly asked softly. Musian was stunned. She showed a charming smile, leaned over Musian's ear, and whispered in a sweet and sexy voice, "Then just think of me now, indulge in me, and then hide your kingly sister with me." Hearing this sweet voice that was so gentle that it seemed to overflow with water, Musian's heart couldn't help but ripple slightly, and he hugged the princess's slender waist. However, before he could make any more moves, the princess suddenly raised her index finger and made a hush gesture to Musian. Before Musian could react, he heard the princess say in her usual gentle and calm tone, "What's the matter with you, Pen Emperor?" Pen Emperor? Pen Emperor is coming. Musian was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately reacted and subconsciously blocked his breath. But then, he noticed the formation in the house, smiled self-deprecatingly, and removed the originally hidden breath. The princess is the daughter of the great Deo. As long as people outside do not deliberately use their spiritual sense to search the house, they will not be able to sense the formation she has set up. In the middle of the night, there is actually a young monk spending the night with her in the princess's house. I heard that my beloved concubine seems to have new insights these days. Could it be that she has already touched the way of Yahweh realm? Hearing the voice coming from outside the house, the princess just winked at Musian playfully. "I do have some insights, otherwise I would not have been in seclusion these days," It's because this matter has caused you a lot of trouble, she answered in her usual gentle voice. I have suppressed the forbidden land of life, my beloved concubine does not need to worry, but how did you realize the way of Yahweh? Dapen Emperor finally asked the question he cared about the most. Well, I happened to absorb some spiritual energy from the heavenly court in Yuzhou a few days ago, so I have some insights, the princess said. I see. The man outside nodded thoughtfully. When will my beloved wife send someone to send Musian back? It's not like he hasn't come into contact with the spiritual energy of the heavenly court before. If he could ascend to heaven with just that little spiritual energy of the heavenly court, he would have already ascended to heaven long ago, and there would be no need to risk going to the forbidden land of life to find the elixir. The princess looked at Musian seductively, tiptoed slightly, and kissed him lightly on the face. Then, a charming smile appeared on her face. I have found Yunyan Lu, and I will have someone take care of Musian. If there is nothing else, you go ahead and get busy. Please give me some votes, there are so many updates in the past 2 days. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to let us know, we will handle it as soon as possible, thank you for your understanding. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 519. In the next 2 days, Musian meditated and practiced in Yunzhou, waiting for the princess to deal with the follow-up trivial matters caused by the turmoil in the forbidden land of life. And occasionally when Musian sat cross-legged in the guest room to meditate and practice, the princess would protect him. The attendant who had been responsible for secretly observing the princess's movements in the past 2 days saw the scene and couldn't help but feel a little more worried. He felt that the wife of His Majesty the Great Peng Emperor seemed to be too close to Musian in the past 2 days. Although he didn't believe that the princess would betray the Great Peng Emperor, she was indeed very close to Musian in the past 2 days, which was an unchangeable fact. In order to be on the safe side, the attendant quietly left the courtyard where Musian lived on the same day and reported the matter to the Great Peng Emperor. You mean, my beloved concubine has been very close to Musian these 2 days? The Great Peng Emperor raised his eyebrows slightly, but his voice was a bit stern, and he said, do you know what the consequences will be if you alienate the relationship between me and my beloved concubine? I dare not, I dare not. It's just that I really saw the princess often leave her courtyard to see Musian these 2 days. Although I didn't see anything between them, but in the past, the princess has never cared so much about a person of the opposite sex. The servant knelt on the ground and answered in fear. A trace of deep thought flashed in the eyes of the Great Peng Emperor, and then he shook his head and smiled. You mean, my beloved concubine would like a young cultivator who has been practicing for less than 20 years? And even get close to him? At the beginning, he made things difficult for Musian, purely because he didn't want any opposite sex to get close to his beloved concubine. But since Musian is the Taoist partner of the Green Emperor, it naturally doesn't matter much. After all, he already had the fairy who was the best in the 9 states as his Taoist partner. No matter how brave Musian was, he would not dare to pay attention to his wife. Moreover, even if Musian had that idea, he had to think about whether the princess would agree. In the past, when the relationship between the princess and the Great Peng Emperor was unknown, many people in Yunzhou had pursued the princess, including cultivators with good family backgrounds, but without exception, no one could get close to her. This was normal. After all, the princess was the daughter of the great Dao Emperor. She had her own pride and was not approached by just anyone. To say that she would care about Musian, the Great Peng Emperor would never believe it. The Emperor Dapen waved his hand and said, okay, you can leave first. After he said that, he stood up and ordered, let the people in the imperial kitchen prepare snacks. Please invite my beloved concubine and Musian to the imperial garden to enjoy them together later. On a leisurely afternoon, the maids carried plates to the pavilion in the imperial garden. In the guest room, Musian absorbed the spiritual energy and circulated it for 3 cycles. Then he heard a knock on the door outside the house. "Come in," Musian said. The door was opened, and the attendant bowed respectfully and said, "Mr. Mu, His Majesty the Emperor Dapen invites you to the garden to enjoy the afternoon food." "The Emperor Dapen actually invited me?" Musian was a little surprised. After all, the Emperor Dapen had a lot of friction with him some time ago, but now he was willing to lower himself and invite him. However, when chatting with the princess in the house these 2 days, Musian knew what the great Peng Emperor had done in Yunzhou in the past, and naturally knew that the invitation from the great Peng Emperor this time was nothing more than for Yao Meng behind him. After all, no one would be willing to conflict with a human emperor in the Yuhua realm. At least on the surface, they were unwilling to tear their faces apart. "I know, you can leave first," Musian nodded slightly. After the servants left, Musian looked up at the courtyard scenery outside the window-sill, and soon gathered his thoughts. He stood up and went to the bronze mirror to straighten his robes a little, and then left the room. Walking a little along a quiet road, he saw a garden vaguely appearing in front of him. "Little friend Mu, why are you here too?" As soon as he walked into the garden, he heard the woman's crisp, pleasant, and gentle voice. Musian looked over and saw the princess sitting under the pavilion. She sat quietly, with her black hair casually draped over her beautiful and charming face, like a peony, plump and sexy. Dapen Emperor sat not far from the princess accompanied by his attendants. When he saw Musian, he smiled and said, "My dear friend Mu, you are really on time. I hope I didn't disturb you to rest." In his words, he was kind to the inferior. Obviously, after so long, in the eyes of Dapen Emperor, Musian is still the inferior. Fortunately, Musian didn't care. He looked flattered and said, "So you and the princess are enjoying the food today? If I had known this, I would not have come to disturb you." The princess rolled up a strand of hair that fell on her forehead and smiled sweetly, "My dear friend Mu, don't worry. After all, you will be back to Yuzhou soon. I think this is the last afternoon tea that Yunzhou will treat you." This smile seemed to have all kinds of charm and was quite tempting. In addition, she was wearing a gorgeous long dress today, and her eyes and eyebrows revealed a gentle temperament like a mother of the world. The invisible charm exuded made Musian's heart burn. The moment her eyes met hers, the princess seemed to have noticed what Musian was thinking at the moment, licked her rosy lips gently, and glanced at Musian with seductive eyes. This woman is simply a goblin." Musian immediately retracted his gaze, with a reserved look on his face. Although he had realized exactly how attractive the princess was after letting go through in-depth communication with the princess over the past 2 days, he still didn't expect that she would be so bold as to flirt with others in front of the Emperor Dapen. But it was obvious that Musian, the actor, performed very well. At least the Emperor Dapen didn't think too much about it, but ordered the servants to leave first and let Musian sit opposite him. The princess happened to be sitting on the side of Musian, holding a cup of tea in her hand, and was sipping it with her head down. At this time, the Emperor Dapen put down his chopsticks and smiled. "A few days ago, my beloved concubine said that she was sending people to find Yunyanliu because the Qing Emperor needed this natural treasure. At that time, I was still thinking about who needed Yunyanliu, a special natural treasure. Now it seems that the Qing Emperor is looking for this Yunyanliu, which is actually prepared for Mu Xiao." When he said this, his eyes intentionally or unintentionally looked at Musian, with some doubts in his eyes. The princess couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She knew that the great Peng Emperor would not invite Musian for no reason. Was he here for this matter? Musian was a young cultivator who had just entered the Return to Void realm. No one would suspect that Musian was the object of refining Yunyan Willow. But she brought Musian to Yunzhou this time. This matter itself was worthy of suspicion. Musian calmly put down the teacup and smiled gently. In fact, the Yunyan Willow was not prepared for Mu Yao Monsoon's Union Willow actually has other uses. Oh. The Great Peng Emperor looked interested. If I remember correctly, Union Willow, a natural treasure, has no other use except for refining Judingli and Xupils, and the only person in the world who can get the help of the Green Emperor is probably Mu Xiao. If it's not that Xiao Mu wants to use Union Willow, then what does the Green Emperor want to do with Union Willow? Mu Xian calmly said, Senior Dapen Emperor must have investigated my affairs in the past few days, right? The Great Peng Emperor's smile froze, and his expression became a little more embarrassed for a while. He did secretly send people to investigate Mu Xian's affairs in the past few days, and he probably knew some of the things that happened to Mu Xian in Tianqian City and Lianji sect in the past. My first Taoist partner was not actually the Green Emperor. Because of this, she has always felt guilty about my first Taoist partner, and now my first Taoist partner has reached the peak of return to void, and is in need of Union Lu to refine the 9 cauldrons refining void pill, so. Mu Xian looked helpless, and his words were 7/10 true and 3/10 false, which also made Dapen Emperor's face more thoughtful. He knew who Mu Xian was talking about. The first beauty in Tianqian City at that time seemed to have a close relationship with the palace master of the Sword Palace. If it was the Green Emperor who prepared Union Lu for her past Green Emperor out of guilt, then it would make sense. Dapen Emperor secretly breathed a sigh of relief and smiled, so that's it, so that's it? If Mu Xian was going to enter the Enlightenment realm, this Union Lu was really hard to give up. After all, Union Lu can only be preserved for 7 days, and Mu Xian has just entered the Return to Void. In other words, Mu Xian had to soar from the Return to Void realm to the peak of the Return to Void realm within 7 days, before he could use the 9 cauldrons refining void pill. This is a very scary thing, even Dapen Emperor is a little afraid. Mu Xian has been practicing for less than 20 years. If he can enter the state of enlightenment, I am afraid he will be a difficult enemy in the future. In order to ease the atmosphere just now, Dapen Emperor quickly invited Mu Xian to enjoy the food in the Yunzhou Palace. The princess sitting next to her slowly peeled the big shrimps caught from the World Sea. Under her long skirt, her white and translucent feet stepped on a pair of small embroidered shoes. She glanced at Dapen Emperor next to her. Then, she casually took off one of the embroidered shoes, raised her eyes slightly, and looked at Mu Xian tenderly. When do you plan to arrange for Mu to return to Yuzhou? Dapen Emperor suddenly asked. The princess said gently, tomorrow. In that case, I will have someone prepare a griffin tomorrow to send Mu back to Yuzhou, Dapen Emperor said. Not appropriate. The princess shook her head gently, friend Mu is someone that the medicine emperor asked me to bring, so it would be safer for me to send him back myself. The Great Peng Emperor frowned and said nothing. The princess stepped lightly on the instep of Mu Xian with her toes, looking calm and saying in a gentle and elegant voice, he is a distinguished guest from Yuzhou, and he is also the Taoist partner of the Green Emperor. If he is allowed to return alone, if something happens on the way, I am afraid that Yunzhou will cause a lot of trouble again. If I send him back, it won't even take half a day, and I can take this opportunity to test when Luo Tan plans to start refining immortal medicine. The princess proposed something that made the Great Peng Emperor extremely excited. Hearing this, the Emperor Dapen showed a hint of surprise and joy on his face, and laughed loudly, okay, in that case, I'll trouble my beloved concubine to tear open the space crack tomorrow and personally send little friend Mu back to Yuzhou. In the past, my beloved concubine never cared about him at all, but this time she was willing to go to Yuzhou for him to test Luo Tan's attitude. Thinking of this, the Emperor Dapen's mood couldn't help but improve, and then his eyes fell on Mu Xian, who was sitting on the ground, and said, little friend Mu, why do you look a little absent-minded? Are you thinking about something? Nothing, I just didn't expect that an ordinary little cultivator like Mu could be treated so well by you and Her Royal Highness the Princess. I was a little touched. Mu Xian shook his head and smiled. Dapen Emperor heard this and raised the teacup in his hand, saying, there were some misunderstandings between me and my friend Mu before. I know that my friend has some grudges in his heart. Today, I will use tea instead of wine. I hope that the misunderstanding between you and me can be resolved. Mu has never dared to have any grudges against Senior Daepan Emperor. After all, you were thinking about Her Royal Highness the Princess at that time, so it was natural that you would misunderstand Mu. Musian raised the teacup and touched it with Daepan Emperor. He took the opportunity to pinch the princess's feet and said softly, "But Mu has always believed that this misunderstanding will be resolved sooner or later, and now it can be regarded as fulfilling his wish. Your Royal Highness the Princess, I also toast you a cup." Musian gestured with the teacup. The princess glanced at Musian with a charming look, retracted her feet, and showed a dignified and gentle smile on her face. "Okay. That night. Your Highness, aren't you afraid of being noticed today?" After finishing his meditation, Musian saw the beauty who had sat beside him with one leg tilted, and couldn't help but speak worriedly. "As both of us are in the Hedeo realm, he can't detect my movements, and besides..." The princess paused and said softly, "You are also enjoying it today, right?" Musian was silent for a while. "I have to admit that although he has been worried about being noticed today, at the same time, he also has a different kind of excitement. It's a pity that you will go back to Yuzhou tomorrow. The things between you and me cannot be known to a third person, even Luo Tan." The princess' eyes dimmed slightly, and she took Musian's arm and leaned her plump body in Musian's arms. "If you miss me in the future, you can come to see me anytime. I will meet you at any time." Musian held the beauty's plump waist and said softly. The princess stopped talking and sniffed the warm breath of the boy. At this time, she began to gradually understand why Luo Tan was so obsessed with this child. The natural furnace was one reason, and the other reason was that when she was with Musian, she could break the boredom of being a great power in the long river of time. As a great power in the Hedeo realm, there are naturally many pursuers, but at this level, they can no longer judge whether the people pursuing them are sincere or have other purposes. Moreover, a cultivator whose realm is far lower than theirs, even if it is sincere, what can it do? Talent, strength, background, the princess does not look down on them. After being promoted to Hedeo, it is destined that there will be no Taoist partner anymore. This is almost an unchanging rule. But at this time, the appearance of Musian broke this rule. Although his realm is not high, his talent, and even his physique, are enough to make up for it all. Moreover, his delicate and handsome appearance is most likely to attract the love and protection desire of the royal sisters. When you have a natural liking for a person of the opposite sex, the sweet words said by the other party can easily nourish a woman's dry heart. The princess raised her head slightly, staring at Musian's handsome face as gentle as jade, his high nose bridge, and his gentle eyes. She couldn't help but hug his neck tightly and whispered, "Before going back, accompany your sister well." At the end of her speech, her beautiful face was about to approach Musian, but at this time, the princess seemed to have noticed something, and her eyes fell on the Qinglian ring on Musian's hand with doubt. The Qinglian ring looked ordinary, but at this time it was faintly flowing with a faint aura. If you don't pay attention, you might subconsciously ignore it. "If I remember correctly, this Qinglian ring was given to you by the Qing Emperor, right?" the princess suddenly asked softly. Musian nodded without thinking. "Yao Meng was worried that I would get hurt, so she gave me the Qinglian ring." "Why are you asking this all of a sudden?" "I see. No wonder she could let her Taoist partner stay in Yuzhou so confidently, and even let him come to Yunzhou." The princess narrowed her beautiful eyes, and a hint of coldness appeared in her gentle eyes. At first she was still confused, thinking that the Qing emperor trusted her character so much, and believed that even if she knew about Musian's natural furnace, he would not do anything to him. But now it seems that the Qing emperor may have already secretly laid a backup plan. Maybe she is still eavesdropping, or even peeping at everything here. As for why the Qing emperor has not shown up until now, there is only one reason to explain it. What she and Musian did has not reached the limit of the Qing emperor's tolerance. Maybe that black-bellied fairy is somewhere watching her joke. What's wrong with you? Musian noticed that the princess looked a little strange, and couldn't help asking with concern, is there something wrong with your body? The princess hummed softly, something went wrong in my practice these 2 days, and my spiritual energy was seriously lost, so I'm probably a little tired. When she said this, she put one hand on Musian's face and said softly, the great Pen Emperor has just returned to the palace to handle government affairs, and it is impossible for him to come to see me in a short time. Musian's heartbeat suddenly accelerated a few points, as if he realized the meaning of her words, and stared at her with burning eyes. The princess hugged Musian's arm, bit her red lips lightly, and raised her gentle and helpless weak eyes, can you help me? You like to peek, do you want me to be socially dead in the future? Then I'll let you see enough. The Holy Land of Yaokai. The fairy in a green dress sat in the bedroom, looking at the woman in the bronze mirror who was hiding the intimacy between Pen Emperor and Musian, and her gentle eyes that she raised from time to time, and fell silent for a while. There is no doubt that the princess came for her. She thought that the princess might have some close actions with Musian, so she used the photo stone on purpose, intending to use it if the princess quarreled with her in the future. But now, looking at the picture in the bronze mirror, Yao Meng's indifferent smile on her face was restrained a little, and at this moment, only one thought came to her mind. I seem to have gone too far. A new week of votes and recommendations. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to let us know, we will deal with it as soon as possible, thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 521. The princess's operation was indeed beyond Yao Meng's expectations, and it was also beyond Musian's expectations. He had expected that the princess would assist him in understanding the laws of the Great Path, but he did not expect that the princess would actually help him understand the laws of the Great Path in the palace in Yunzhou. After all, this is Yunzhou, the territory of Emperor Pen. And even if Emperor Pen is still handling government affairs, it does not mean that Emperor Pen will not suddenly come to the princess to discuss something like he did a few days ago. Under such circumstances, this charming wife chose to let him experience the great method in advance today. Musian looked at the beauty nestling lazily in his arms. She raised her head just in time and smiled, what's wrong? Are you unwilling? The tenderness in her beautiful eyes had an indescribable charm. In just that moment, Musian's eyes were completely attracted to the princess. Then, the moment their eyes met, Musian slowly lowered his head and occupied the woman's soft lips. I have to admit that secretly making out with the princess in this environment is too risky. However, he couldn't refuse. Early the next morning, Musian slowly opened his eyes and stretched his waist lazily. He shook his hands slightly and felt that the law of the Great Avenue seemed to flow through his body at this moment. Although he was not recognized by Deo, he had definitely experienced the beauty of Deo. The soft big bed was a little messy, but the bedding had been neatly folded and put aside. Musian saw a note on the table, which said, "Come to me in the main hall of the palace after you wake up, and I will take you back to Yuzhou." It seemed that not only him, but also the princess was also worried about being discovered, so did she choose to leave secretly in the middle of the night? Musian smiled silently and held the note in his palm. The next moment, the note turned into fire and dissipated in the room. He simply straightened up his manners, smoothed out the wrinkles on his robe, and then left the room. After walking for nearly half a quarter of an hour, he finally saw the main hall of the palace. Today's princess was wearing the silver-white dress that Muzian had designed for her before. Her hair was carefully combed into a bun on the back of her head, with a few strands of hair landing gently on the jade neck. There was a golden walking stick inserted in her hair, her beautiful face was hidden under a mysterious veil, and a pair of beautiful eyes as gentle as a mother's in the world looked down at Muzian in the palace. Under the hem of the skirt, a pair of delicate white stockings wrapped her slender legs, outlining the sexiness that only a married woman can have. "You're here." The princess showed a gentle smile and looked calm, as if she was not the person in Muzian's room last night. However, the moment Muzian saw the princess, he thought of everything in the room yesterday for no reason. If he hadn't seen another side of the princess, I'm afraid he would have been immersed in the princess's tenderness at this time. "Don't dare to feel even the slightest bit blasphemous." The princess glanced at Emperor Dapen, who was not far away, and said with a smile, "Then I will send him back to Yuzhou first." Emperor Dapen sat high in front of the throne, nodded slightly and said, "I have to trouble my beloved concubine this time." The princess stood up, held up her skirt and walked down the steps step by step. Her eyes looked at Muzian tenderly, her red lips parted lightly, and she said softly, "It's not troublesome, it's all within your duties." Emperor Dapen laughed loudly and said, "As long as my beloved concubine doesn't mind the trouble, then you can send little friend Mu back to Yuzhou first. The matters here in Yunzhou will be left to me to handle for the time being." Taking advantage of this opportunity, he could also reduce some of the princess's weight in Yunzhou over the years. Although he has been busy with the matter of ascension, it does not mean that he really does not care about the position of the Lord of Yunzhou. The princess naturally knew what Emperor Dapen was thinking, but she didn't care at all. She just said in a gentle and sweet voice, and looked at Muzian's beautiful eyes full of tenderness. He said softly, "Don't worry, little friend Mu, I will take care of it." She walked slowly to Muzian's side, her crystal earrings swaying slightly, and the moment she raised her hand to tear open the crack in space, brilliance filled the main hall. The princess raised her hand and casually threw a slender hair attached to the back of Muzian's neck to the ground without leaving a trace. She whispered in a gentle and deliberately suppressed voice, "Next time you eat secretly, remember to tidy it up. How about your manners?" Thinking about it, it must be the hair she accidentally left behind last night. Yuzhou is so big that for ordinary monks, they may not be able to leave and go to another big state in their lifetime. But for the great power of Hedeo, it doesn't take much time to tear open the cracks in space and reach the destination. Unknowingly, Muzian and the princess had appeared outside the palace in Yuzhou. After ordering the attendants to enter the palace to inform Luo Tan, the two of them waited leisurely outside the palace, admiring the unknown plants planted on both sides of the palace. It is famous as a treasure of heaven, material, and earth. Yesterday you have fully realized what it is like to blend in with the great Dao. I think it won't be long after this, before you can truly understand the laws of the great Dao. The princess was admiring the scenery outside the palace, and suddenly thought of something, and whispered in a somewhat instructive tone, "But you must remember that your understanding of the great Dao must not let others know that it has anything to do with me." "Why?" Muzian asked puzzledly. "You still have to ask why? Is it possible that you want what happened between you and me to be exposed?" A shy blush appeared on the princess's pretty face, and she lowered her voice and spoke. "If the things between you and me are known to the world, they will eventually be discussed by the world, so if possible, let's keep the relationship like this." Muzian hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Don't you mind?" Muzian didn't mind that he could only maintain such a secret and intimate relationship with him, but he didn't know what the princess thought. "Of course I mind," said the princess. But before Muzian could speak, she raised her eyes, staring at him with moist and gentle eyes, and continued, "But what I mind is not that the relationship between you and me cannot be exposed to others, but—" The princess didn't say anything more when she said this. She didn't mind that her relationship with Musian couldn't be exposed, but when she thought that this young man would return to the side of the Green Emperor after this, thinking about it, people felt a little subtle. "Why don't you finish what you said?" Although Musian wanted to ask further, he knew that the princess didn't want to say it when he saw her like this, so he didn't ask any more questions to embarrass her. "Anyway, I don't mind, so Mulang doesn't have to worry about my thoughts. It's better to say." The princess paused, glanced at the servants who were all bowing their heads not far away, tiptoed slightly, and opened her rosy and sexy lips. Her sweet voice sounded softly in Musian's ears, "This kind of immoral pleasure, not only Mulang, I like it too." Dong dong. Musian's heartbeat quickened a few points, and he subconsciously turned his head to look at the princess. The woman's beautiful eyes, which used to be tender and affectionate, now seemed to be full of enchantment. "This fairy is getting more and more angry. It turns out that there is no simple one in the Hedeo realm." Musian sighed in his heart. A little later, a maid stepped on the void outside the palace. She seemed to be far away the moment before, but the next moment, she seemed to have appeared in front of the two. Musian recognized her identity. She was one of the personal maids who had been with Luotan for many years. The maid bowed slightly and said respectfully, "His Majesty Luotan just left the morning court early. Please come to the courtyard for a chat." Yuzhou is different from any big state that Musian knows. In his impression, this immortal dynasty is like an iron plate without any loopholes. It is no wonder that Musian has such an impression. Among the 9 states, the distribution of forces in Dongzhou is the most complicated. Dongzhou alone is divided into several major forces, and each force is no less powerful than any big state. The demon world has experienced a civil war in the past. Even though the demon queen came to control the overall situation, when she was in power, she was more focused on repairing the trauma that the first demon emperor had brought to the demon world. Looking at the 9 provinces, only Yuzhou has never experienced civil strife. After Luotan achieved the state of unity, he suppressed the taboo of Yuzhou and founded the immortal dynasty. In Yuzhou, no one has ever raised any objection to Luotan, so that their Majesty Luotan has been so caring for a little cultivator during this period, and no one in the palace has any objection. However, they are also curious about what kind of deal the Qing Emperor made with His Majesty to make the Alchemy Empress take such care of Musian, and even retired early after learning that he had returned. When Musian followed the maid to a courtyard not far from the palace, he saw the noble and elegant white-dressed Empress sitting under the courtyard. She looked up at the two of them with a smile on her face. "Thank you for your hard work. I've troubled you to send him back specially." The princess shook her head gently and said gently, "Emperor Dapen and I are worried about letting little friend Mu come back alone. It just so happens that Emperor Dapen has something to do and can't get away, so I have to send him off in person. Sorry, it's obviously my business, but I ended up involving you." Luotan looked at her best friend with a bit of apology in her eyes. If it weren't for the princess this time, Yun Yanliu might not have been easy to find. Afterwards, she motioned for the two of them to take a seat, poured tea for Musian and the others, and said, "I've heard about what happened in Yunzhou these days." Luotan said, "The life forbidden zone has not expanded outward for tens of thousands of years. I didn't expect that this time they would take the initiative to occupy the territory of Yunzhou." The princess took off her veil, revealing a charming and beautiful face. She opened her red lips and said, "The Forbidden Land has never intended to stay dormant in one place. Didn't what happened in Zhuzhou prove this?" Her tone was always gentle, as if a lover whispered in your ear, making your bones numb. "What big thing happened in Zhuzhou?" Musian asked at the right time. Luotan was about to speak, but at this time, the princess had already answered first, "We don't know what happened specifically, but some people have speculated that there was a war in Zhuzhou, and the creatures in the 9 forbidden lands were injured and shrunk their territories. Later, The ancient creature in the reincarnation forbidden land was unwilling to be lonely and wanted to let the rules of the reincarnation forbidden land cover the entire Yuzhou, but it was already injured at that time, and Luo Tan held the all things transformation cauldron, so he finally suppressed it in the forbidden land. After the princess finished speaking, she suddenly noticed Luo Tan's half-smiley eyes beside her, and seemed to realize her loss of composure just now, so she continued in a light tone. In short, the affairs of the Forbidden Land are not something you can interfere with. You, a young cultivator who has just returned to the void, don't need to ask so many questions. It seems that your previous prejudice against him has changed a lot in the past 2 days. Luo Tan looked at the princess with a playful look and said. A few days ago, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the princess was quite dissatisfied with Musian, but now she actually answered Musian's questions, and it seems that her attitude towards him has also eased a lot. It seems that after leaving Yuzhou for these days, her close friend has finally experienced his advantages. I did have some prejudices against him before, but I have seen some of his advantages in the past 2 days, and... The princess paused and said softly, since you have made up your mind, I can only throw away my original prejudice against him as much as possible. I don't want you and I to meet each other one day. This time, the princess' tone was a little more serious. That day won't come. Luo Tan shook his head and smiled. Yunzhou is Yunzhou, you are you, even if the relationship between Yuzhou and Yunzhou is no longer the same as before, it will not affect the relationship between you and me. After all, there is more than just Yunzhou between you and me now. When she said this, she looked at the princess meaningfully. The princess was slightly startled. For some reason, she felt a little guilty, because she suddenly couldn't understand Luo Tan. Over the years, because of Yunzhou's affairs, she has had many interactions with people in Yuzhou, but every time she met Luo Tan, they basically talked about business. It's no longer like before, they can chat and play chess with each other. A few days ago, she came to see Luo Tan. In fact, the biggest reason was also for Yunzhou. But she didn't expect that Luo Tan told her a secret. The secret of ascension. Although Luo Tan did not make the truth of this secret clear, she gradually found the truth, that is, the young man next to her. Have you tasted the spiritual energy of the heaven? This time, Luo Tan used telepathy to ask the princess. The princess' body was slightly stiff, and her slender hands on her knees subconsciously grasped the hem of her skirt, staring at Luo Tan's smiling eyes. It was not until a long time later that her hands slowly relaxed. What are you talking about? The princess replied in telepathy, but even the voice of the telepathy was subconsciously lowered a few points. It was obviously her best friend's cake, but she took it to Yunzhou and ate it on the spot, and brought the stolen cake back openly. This matter alone made the princess feel full of guilt towards Luo Tan. You don't have to hide it deliberately. Luo Tan smiled brightly. You might as well guess why I told you that day that I knew the secret of Yuhua Ascension. The princess was silent for a long time, and her mind flashed all kinds of scenes that happened after she met Luo Tan a few days ago. She did have doubts about this matter. Why did Luo Tan say that he knew the secret of the ascension, but didn't tell her what this secret was? Luo Tan is not the kind of person who deliberately whet people's appetite. Unless Luo Tan deliberately wanted to arouse her curiosity. You wanted to drag me into the water from the beginning. The princess stared at the noble and elegant empress and blurted out subconsciously. Luo Tan smiled but said nothing. I just have this idea, but everything is up to fate. Whether you can fall in love with him in the end is not something I can guide. I thought my best friend didn't have any bad intentions, but I didn't expect that this best friend's heart was black when it was opened. She even calculated it together. The princess stared at Luo Tan quietly for a long time without saying a word. I am also thinking about you. The great Peng Emperor is immersed in the matter of his ascension to heaven. You don't have anyone you can trust in Yunzhou. I am afraid you are also very lonely in the deep palace of Yunzhou. If you can take this opportunity to relieve your loneliness and ascend to heaven, why not? Luo Tan said with a smile. You are wrong. Although the spiritual energy in the heavenly court is good, what I am interested in is not his natural furnace. However, this time, the princess shook her head and denied Luo Tan's words. Luo Tan was slightly startled and was about to ask, but heard the princess again in a gentle voice, he doesn't like the great Dao but me, so, what I like is only him, not the natural furnace. By the way, since you confessed to me, I will tell you a secret, the princess continued. Luo Tan raised her eyebrows slightly. What secret? The princess opened her red lips and whispered something. Almost at that moment, Luo Tan's eyes slowly widened, his expression changed slightly, and he stared at the princess in disbelief. But I didn't see any trace of magic on Musian. Where did the Green Emperor leave the magic? The Green Lotus Ring, the princess replied. At this moment, the Yuzhou Empress, who thought she had everything under control, couldn't help but fall into a brief silence. Although she thought that the Green Emperor would not leave his Taoist partner in Yuzhou for no reason, and that the Green Emperor might have left some magic on Musian to facilitate secret observation, but she scanned Musian with her spiritual sense and didn't find any trace of magic. Unexpectedly, the problem was with the Green Lotus Ring. It's really a mantis stalking a cicada, while the oriole is behind. If it weren't for the princess's reminder, she probably wouldn't have known that everything she did was actually under the control of the Green Emperor. There have always been many intrigues in the palace, but Luo Tan didn't expect that there would be a day when he would be caught up in it. Luo Tan narrowed his eyes, and there was a little more thoughtfulness in his eyes when he looked at the Green Lotus Ring. It seems that even if she doesn't hesitate to let herself be a little green, Fairy Yao Meng also hopes that her Taoist partner can realize the Tao as soon as possible. Maybe, she is still watching now. What were you two talking about just now? If it's not convenient, Mu will withdraw first and not disturb your business. At this time, Musian finally couldn't help but speak. The two women just didn't say a word. Even a fool could see that they were probably whispering something in secret, let alone Musian. However, the moment Musian stood up, Luo Tan also stood up, took Musian's arm, and then showed a charming smile. Nothing, don't worry. Luo Tan's bright eyes looked at the princess. Then, she stepped half a step closer in her white boots, lay beside Musian, and whispered in a charming voice, I was just discussing with the princess how to give you a surprise. Surprise? Musian looked at Luo Tan doubtfully, but saw the noble and elegant empress of the immortal dynasty looking at him affectionately. Then, she took another half step closer, her red lips came close, and whispered in Musian's ear. You will know tonight. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 522. Unconsciously, it was already night again. Located deep in a paradise in Dongzhou, the tribesmen in the restricted area were discussing the reason why the young lady had been writing letters to Yuzhou frequently in the past 2 days. Some young disciples who knew the truth were quite indignant, because they knew that the young lady had been thinking about Musian since she came back, and she had specially collected the reincarnation water a few days ago and asked someone to send it to the sacred land of Yaokai. Musian was obviously married, but he still had an unclear relationship with the young lady and was still hanging on her. Isn't this a complete scumbag? The disciples in the restricted area only hated Musian for not coming back with the young lady this time, otherwise they would have taught him a lesson that he would never forget and let him back down. In the restricted area, on the top floor of the Nebula building, a girl stood in front of the high platform on the roof. She was wearing a complicated and gorgeous purple long skirt. There seemed to be a faint golden chain floating from her snow-white wrist between her cuffs, just forming a picture scroll. In the scroll, a young man appeared. She knew about Musian's trip to Yuzhou, so naturally she couldn't say anything. But the princess's affairs were not within her knowledge. When she first saw the princess's figure in the scroll, She was not worried at all, because she knew that the princess was the wife of the Lord of Yunzhou, and the princess had wanted to stop Musian before, thinking that Musian was not worthy of Luotan. Because of this, she didn't care at all when she saw the princess's stunning appearance. Ya Lingxian has such capital. In terms of appearance alone, she will not lose to the princess in the future. But she underestimated Musian and the status of Tianjin glitting in the hearts of female cultivators. She even underestimated the psychology of these female emperors in the Hedao realm. Is this the Hedao realm? Why do they all like the tune of N.T.R so much? It was only 7 days since she had peeked at Brother Mu's situation. When she peeked again, the princess of Yunzhou was actually having an affair with Brother Mu. Ya Lingxian looked at the contents of the scroll constructed by the Lock of Desolate Time, and a sense of confusion rose in her heart. She felt as if, did I miss 100 chapters in the past few days? Less than 7 days, in less than 7 days, this beautiful wife got together with Brother Mu. If it weren't for the imminent inheritance ceremony of the Lord of the Forbidden Zone, Ya Lingxian would probably have gone directly to Yuzhou to bring back her beloved Brother Mu. But now is the critical juncture. Only by completely integrating with the reincarnated queen can she inherit all the memories she once left behind and become the real queen of the Forbidden Zone. Therefore, now she can only watch her beloved Brother Mu being intimate with other women, but she has no way to do anything. I wanted to take Brother Mu back to the restricted area after I achieve enlightenment or even ascend to heaven, but what if he has already turned into the shape of other vixens before that? The purple-skirted girl sighed softly. The chain of desolate time has locked him. No matter where he is, you can bring him back if you want. Behind her, Ye Qingxin's cold and pleasant voice sounded in the high-rise building. She hugged her arms to her chest and leaned against the stone pillar behind her. There was a hint of tenderness in her charming red eyes, but now is not the time to bring him back. You should understand, right? Ya Lingxian was silent. Indeed, she agreed to let Brother Mu go to Yuzhou before, just to let him realize the truth as soon as possible, so that he would have the means to protect himself. If she brings him back now, wouldn't her patience be wasted before? Ancestor, only you understand my feelings, and only you are not my enemy. Ya Lingxian turned around and buried her face in Ye Qingxin's arms, subconsciously relying on the beautiful ancestor of the Ye family. The summer night breeze blew Ye Qingxin's black and red interwoven dress back, and the stars of fire lingered around her, like a witch in fire. Ye Qingxin held the girl in her arms and gently stroked Ye Lingxian's hair to comfort her, but when she looked at the girl's pure and quiet face, a hint of complexity flashed in Ye Qingxin's eyes. Sorry, it's not just the princess and the medicine emperor you mentioned who are bad women. Me too. At nightfall, Musian came to the palace's bedroom as agreed. What Luotan said during the day made Musian still care. If the person who spoke was not the Empress of Yuzhou, Musian would probably say to her directly, "Get out of here, riddle man." Walking into the bedroom, he saw Luotan sitting at the table by the window. She was reading a book in her hand, and she didn't seem to notice that Musian had come in. You are quite punctual. Last time when I went to Zunyun Academy, did you also come to the bedroom to see me at that time? Luotan didn't look up, and asked while flipping through the book. Musian nodded. It's a pity that I didn't see your majesty in the bedroom last time because of the Sabbath, otherwise. What if it's not? Luotan looked away from the book and looked at him with a slightly smiling look. Otherwise, I can be alone with your majesty for a while longer. Musian's tone was full of regret. Luotan couldn't help but smile, and gently gestured to the chair next to him, sit down first. After Musian sat down, Luotan sat with her legs crossed elegantly. She was wearing the luxurious white dress that she had not changed after leaving the court today. The hem of the dress was inlaid with gold and silver threads, which was luxurious and elegant. Although you didn't see me last time, you saw another me. It's not too regrettable, right? Luotan suddenly asked with a smile. Maybe you are still secretly happy in your heart. I always feel that our queen is not very friendly tonight, Musian sighed lightly, even I can't see the disguise of the Hedeo realm. If I knew that the person in the bedroom was the princess, I would not dare to offend her even if I had the courage. Do you dare to say that you don't have any thoughts about the princess? Luo Tan asked. Musian was silent for a while. If he really said that he didn't have any thoughts about the princess at the beginning, it would naturally be unrealistic. Besides, she is the princess of the Great Dao, the key to whether one can comprehend the Great Dao, even whether Miss Ling Long can ascend to heaven with the help of the Great Dao may have to start from the princess. Such a beautiful wife with top-notch looks and figure, who wouldn't be moved? It seems that you are quite honest. Seeing Musian's silence, Luo Tan already had the answer in her heart. Her smile was bright and moving under the candlelight, without any jealousy at all, but a faint arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. Did you gain anything from your trip to Yunzhou this time? Musian slowly opened his palm, and a willow leaf that looked as ethereal as clouds and smoke appeared in his palm. Thanks to you and Her Royal Highness, I have successfully brought back the Union Willow. Luo Tan nodded slightly and said to himself, with the Union Willow and other key medicinal materials prepared by the Green Emperor, I can prepare the remaining materials in Yuzhou within a quarter of an hour. In this way, the Judingliangsu pill will be completed. When she said this, her left leg was placed on her right leg, and her black silk legs in snow-white jade boots were hidden under the white dress. Her fingertips touched her hair and smiled. After refining the pill, the next step is to wait for you to practice to the peak of returning to the void in a few decades, and then you can use the Judingliangsu pill to break through the enlightenment realm. But it's really strange to think about it this way. Why did the Green Emperor start planning for you so early? Luo Tan's tone was a little puzzled, but his eyes looking at Musian were full of a playful smile. Musian was startled, and then he was silent for a long time before he said speechlessly, since you know everything, don't tease me again. Obviously, Luo Tan had already reacted. The reason why Yao Meng had started to plan for Musian so early and asked her to refine the 9 cauldrons refining void pill was that she guessed that she would take advantage of the period when the Green Emperor was away to get close to Musian. Although she didn't know why the Empress reacted, she obviously guessed the truth at this moment. Fairy Yao Meng is really open-minded. She was willing to send her own Taoist partner to the arms of other women, and even had the leisure to peek. Could it be that the word green in the Green Emperor actually means green in the literal sense? Luo Tan spoke slowly, and when the voice fell, Musian was in extreme shock. What did you say just now? Musian's first reaction was unbelievable, and a thought came to his mind, oh my god, I was peeped. Then the second reaction was relief. Well, after all, it was Yao Meng. Although she always said that she had no interest in peeping at others, it was enough to just listen to her words. It was not like Yao Meng had not peeped in his natural furnace before. When Musian was relieved, he soon felt a chill on his back. Yao Meng knew everything, which meant that she also knew about his affairs with the princess in Yunzhou during this period. Just as Musian was about to speak, Luo Tan had already reached out and gently stroked the Qinglian ring on Musian's right hand. An elegant and lazy soft voice sounded in the bedroom, Kingdi, how long are you going to peep? Silence. For a moment, in the entire Yuzhou palace, the actions of all the cultivators seemed to have stopped, the wind outside the house also quietly stagnated, and the bed curtains condensed in the air, motionless. The candlelight on the table turned grey, and everything around turned grey, only Luo Tan was colorful. Then in the next moment, a green light quietly condensed in the air of the bedroom, and a woman's flawless and graceful figure could be vaguely seen in the green light. Her long hair was scattered to her white calves, and her beautiful eyes were full of tenderness like compassion for the world, as if she had descended from the 9 heavens, high above. Luo Tan was not at all surprised by Yao Meng's appearance. As early as when the princess told her the secret of the Qinglian ring, she had already realized everything. I have always wondered why you were so confident to leave your Taoist partner in Yuzhou, so you have been secretly spying on all this, Luo Tan asked leisurely. The reason why you brought him here for me to take care of him is probably because you took a fancy to my natural furnace, right? That's right. Yao Meng opened her red lips lightly, and the beautiful fairy sound like the sound of nature rang in the bedroom. To Luo Tan's surprise, Yao Meng actually admitted it frankly. Luo Tan raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "You don't deny it?" "It's the truth, and since you know the truth, there's no point in denying it," Yao Meng answered lightly. "You should know that what I hate most in my life is other people's schemes. This alone is enough for me to blacklist Yaokai Holy Land forever," Luo Tan said quietly. Plan. However, when Yao Meng heard this, he couldn't help showing a faint smile. "If Yao Huang doesn't have any thoughts about him, with the blessing of the formation in Yuzhou, I can still force you to do whatever you want. Wouldn't it be possible for you to dedicate your entire body to him if you like something?" Luo Tan. Even the Alchemy Empress, who had experienced numerous intrigues in the past, was speechless for a moment. "I just entrusted you to help take care of him for a few days. Have I ever said anything like asking you to give him to him before?" Yao Meng continued to ask. "I am the one who plots against you. Whether you want to be plotted against or not is your decision from the beginning to the end. If you don't have any evil intentions towards my Taoist companion, how could you possibly be plotted against me?" Sheng Shengxian said in a gentle and calm tone, making it difficult for Luo Tan to refute for a moment. She pursed her lips and wanted to speak, but found that there seemed to be nothing to say. She exposed King Di's voyeurism and also exposed King Di's plan, but the problem is, after all this matter, she seems to be really unreasonable. At that time, Emperor Qing only asked Luo Tan to take care of Muzian for a few days, and said nothing else. As a result, after Emperor Qing left, Luo Tan secretly wanted to eat up this cake. "When I meet you today, I don't want to talk to you about boring things like who is right and who is wrong," Luo Tan said as much as possible in his usual elegant and calm tone. "I want to make a deal with you." "Okay, what do you want?" Yao Meng asked softly. "As long as I can give it to you, it's okay. After all, the cause of this incident was indeed caused by me." Luo Tan turned to look at the young man beside him, his eyes softened slightly, and he said warmly, "I want him." Yao Meng shook his head gently. "You can ask for anything in Yaokai Holy Land, except him." Luo Tan pondered for a moment and showed a charming smile. "How about not interfering in the private affairs between me and him from now on?" Yao Meng was silent for a while. Luo Tan deserves to be said to be the Empress of Yuzhou, and her perspective on seeing things is really tricky. Luo Tan knew that she could not give up her husband, so she first put forward the impossible condition of wanting Muzian, and then settled for the next best thing, but the condition still revolved around Muzian. It just so happens that this condition is in a very ambiguous position. It would be a pity to refuse it, but it would be a bit hesitant not to refuse it. After all, no one likes to lose their love to someone else, even just for a short time. But this is related to whether Muzian can achieve enlightenment in a short time. Luo Tan seemed to be sure of victory, and smiled and said, "You should know how long it takes to reach the peak of returning to the void under normal circumstances, right? It can range from decades to thousands of years." "It all depends on your luck and talent," Yao Meng said calmly. "In addition, you should also be aware of the benefits that the Tian furnace can bestow." Luo Tan stood up leisurely as he spoke, and then said in a gentle and sincere tone, "I will give him everything I have, but I also need your promise today." Yao Meng's beautiful eyes flickered, as if she was weighing the pros and cons. Luo Tan is a natural cauldron, and the person who practices dual cultivation with her for the first time can rise to a great level in a short time, and as the Empress of Yuzhou, the only medicine emperor in Kyushu who has the opportunity to refine immortal elixirs, she will be in the future. It will be of great help to Muzian. The most important thing is, the medicine king may not even realize that he has actually fallen into it. On the surface, it seems that Luo Tan fell in love with Yao Meng, but in the final analysis, Muzian's first Taoist companion was not Yao Meng at all. Moreover, Muzian has already had skin-to-skin contact with so many beauties, so what if there is one more Luo Tan? But what is going on with these women? Could it be that I have been lonely for too long? Why are all the hobbies similar to my own? Yao Meng felt a little weird in her heart. Soon, she let out a breath and smiled brightly. Okay, I promise you. At this moment, time in the dormitory where time had stagnated began to flow, and the grey dormitory gradually returned to bright and moving colors. Muzian seemed a little surprised when he saw Yao Meng, and subconsciously said, "Are you really hiding in my Qinglian ring?" It's just that the spiritual consciousness I resided in the Qinglian ring happened to be awakened by Luo Tan. Yao Meng smiled slightly, and with her skirt flying, her white jade feet stepped on the void and walked towards Muzian step by step. Then under Luo Tan's gaze, she lowered her head slightly, and her red lips gently occupied Muzian's lips. After a while, she glanced sideways, satisfying Luo Tan's hobby, and said softly, "Then, I will trouble you to take care of my husband." Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 523. After you used the principle of time to freeze time, what did you talk to her about? No matter how you listen to Yao Meng's words just now, it is very strange, so that even Muzian, a battle-hardened veteran, can't hold it back at this moment. Nothing, just chatting about some trivial matters with the King of Medicine. Don't worry about it, Yao Meng smiled. Although she said so, Muzian knew that they were obviously talking about their own things. It's just that Yao Meng didn't want to say it, and he couldn't ask at this special time. Yao Meng raised her head and looked at Luo Tan, saying softly, "I hope you remember to abide by the agreement between you and me. According to the agreement, I will refine the Juding Liangsu pill in the next few days and give it to him." The noble and elegant queen walked to Muzian's side. She was about the same height as Muzian, but when she stepped on the snow-white boots, she seemed to exude a sense of oppression invisibly. She looked back at Yao Meng's eyes and smiled, "You don't have to worry." "So what did you talk about?" "Did you know that the riddle man wanted mugwort?" Muzian wanted to ask, but at this time, Yao Meng's figure in the air had turned into an illusory figure. Finally, she looked at Muzian meaningfully and quietly returned to the Qinglian ring. "The matter is finally temporarily resolved now." Luo Tan stretched her graceful figure lazily, then looked at Muzian with a slight smile, and said, "I know you have a lot of questions to ask me, but you only need to know one thing now." She paused deliberately to attract Muzian's attention, and continued, "Your sister Qingdi has handed you over to me." Muzian. "Well, it's not quite accurate to say this, but at least when you are in Yuzhou, you are mine." Luo Tan used more accurate words to correct the mistakes in her language description just now. "When did you know that a trace of her spiritual consciousness was left in the Qinglian ring?" Muzian hesitated. Luo Tan smiled and said, "Have you forgotten who I am? Alchemists are born with sharper spiritual awareness and stronger mental power than others." Muzian was a little confused. "If that's the case, why didn't you let Sister Qingdi show up at the beginning? Instead, you kept dragging it on until now." Luo Tan said, "You might as well guess the reason yourself. If I say now that I never thought that Qingdi would leave his spiritual awareness in Muzian's Qinglian ring, but the princess reminded her not long ago, this answer is too embarrassing and damages the image of the Medicine King. Even the powerful people in the Hedeo realm are not omniscient, but most cultivators have never had the opportunity to approach them, so in their eyes, the image of the Hedeo powerful people is always mysterious and powerful." Muzian looked doubtful. "You didn't just find out not long ago, did you?" Luo Tan glanced at Musian, but did not answer. His cold voice sounded. I will refine the Judingli and Xupil for you in the next few days, but before that, I need to set up a shielding formation in the palace to prevent people from noticing that you have broken through to the peak of the return to void. Musian thought that the queen's way of changing the subject was really abrupt, but he noticed Luo Tan's threatening look, as if to try to ask again, and finally gave in temporarily. A real man can bend and stretch. Now you dare to threaten me with your eyes, I will make you beg for mercy and call daddy later. Because we can't let the great powers of Juzhu notice that I have been promoted to the peak of the return to void in one night, Musian asked. Luo Tan looked at him with appreciation. That's the reason. In one night, suddenly soaring from the first level of return to void to the peak of return to void, even if you took a fairy-grade pill, it would not be so outrageous. If someone really notices the movement in the Yuzhou Palace at the first time, the powerful people in Juzhu will immediately think that Luo Tan is practicing dual cultivation with a cultivator of the opposite sex. Musian will be pushed to the forefront at that time. Being remembered by others, this is not a good thing. And the great Peng Emperor will also react. The 9 cauldrons refining void pill is prepared for Musian. Is there anything I need to do? Musian asked. Luo Tan pondered for a moment and smiled brightly. You just need to be prepared to step into the realm of enlightenment and accept the test of heavenly tribulation. Among 1,000 cultivators in the return to void realm, it is good to have 1 or 2 who can successfully realize the Tao. Although you have the 9 cauldrons refining void pill, it is not safe enough. Don't be careless. It's best to adjust your condition to the best. Are you listening to me? Luo Tan frowned slightly, and Musian had already put his hands on Luo Tan's waist. A warm breath made the Empress's delicate body soften slightly, and a sweet breath came out of her red lips. Didn't Her Majesty ask me to prepare myself to enter the realm of enlightenment? A night of spring is worth 1,000 gold. Musian had just finished speaking when she saw the beautiful queen tense up and 2 faint blushes on her face. She looked at Musian with complicated eyes and said, It seems that I don't know enough about you. Musian asked in confusion, What does Your Majesty mean by this? Luo Tan did not answer, but gently pushed Musian away, left his arms, and walked towards the door of the bedroom with sexy steps. She did know enough about Musian. At first, she thought Musian was a shy and reserved boy, and he treated his seniors with great respect. That's why, when she learned about the relationship between Musian and Qingdi in Lianji sect, she wanted to eat the cake without telling Qingdi. But now it seems that her impression of Musian is still a little different from the real Musian. But it doesn't matter. After all, she herself is not as reserved and elegant as Musian imagined. At least not when they are intimate in private. Luo Tan gently pushed open the door of the bedroom. Musian looked at Luo Tan standing at the door of the bedroom and was about to ask her why she opened the door. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt that there seemed to be something unusual in his personal interface. Musian raised his hand and opened the personal interface, and found that 2 extremely ancient mysterious runes appeared on the personal interface. All of them are in the same order as the formation character Yuanwen, corresponding to the 5th and 6th seats in the heavenly court. So, Huang Weifeng may have been solved. Musian took the opportunity to check the various titles on his personal interface and found that he had indeed obtained the new title of Son of the Chosen. Musian was not surprised by Huang Weifeng's death. In the past tens of thousands of years in the southern wilderness, the status of the god of space has remained unshakable, which is enough to show that Shui Yi is not a good person. That woman's behavior seems to be full of tenderness. If you are not careful, you may be immersed in the love net she has woven. At the beginning, even Musian almost fell into her trap and could not control the god of space. If it weren't for the use of the power of the original witch to suppress her before, and the fact that the other party now has a common body with Regina, Musian really would have to secretly guard against Shui Yi. Even Musian, and even the former 3 pillars of the gods, are quite afraid of this god of space, not to mention Huang Weifeng, who is immersed in the gentleness of women and thinks that he has great luck and is difficult to die. Musian quickly closed his personal interface and looked at Luo Tan, who was standing at the door of the bedroom, and asked, "Your Majesty, why did you suddenly open the door of the bedroom?" The lights in the bedroom were bright, and the candlelight made the figure of the Empress in white dress look particularly slender, and the black silk legs seemed to faintly reveal the whiteness of her skin under the candlelight. Luo Tan looked back at him and smiled, "I have prepared a little surprise for you." She snapped her fingers, the candlelight went out in an instant, and the door of the bedroom slowly closed. The moonlight shone in through the window sill, and the silver light sprinkled down. When Musian saw Luo Tan coming, he couldn't help but whispered, "Your Majesty, won't you regret it?" Luo Tan walked to Musian, tilted his head slightly, smiled and said, "What do you regret?" "Regret summoning you to see me tonight, or regret the deal I made with you?" "I have never regretted anything I have done in my life. Do you think I care about my ascension to heaven?" Luo Tan jumped lightly in front of the windowsill and sat on the table, with the moonlight shining behind him. She looked down at Musian, with a beautiful face, long hair tied behind her head, sexy and plump figure hidden in a gorgeous white dress, a pair of slender legs wrapped in black silk, knee-high white boots swinging, revealing the temperament of a queen dominating the world. Luo Tan continued, "I may not be the strongest in the Hedeo realm, but I am the one that the Hedeo masters are most willing to befriend. You should know the reason, right?" Musian hesitated and said, "Pills." Luo Tan hummed softly, "In the 9 provinces, I am the only one who can refine immortal pills. I also passed on the optimization method of cultivating the emperor medicine. If you want to prolong your life, there are more than just the method of ascending to heaven. In Yuzhou, there are special formations, just like Shang Yanfei of Lianji sect, the god of space in the southern wilderness. In their own territory, the combat power will be stronger than that of ordinary Hedeo realm." Musian walked to her side and sat down, saying, "Since you don't have such a strong desire to ascend to heaven, why did you choose me?" Luo Tan thought for a while and smiled, "At first, it was because I was lonely for tens of thousands of years. When I saw that the fairy Yao Qi, who had made countless cultivators in Zhuzhu Dream, finally chose a young cultivator as her Taoist partner, I became interested and tried to learn a little bit about her. At first, I just had a playful mentality, but recently I began to think that having a Taoist partner seems to be quite good. At least in this grey palace, it can also add some color." Musian pondered, he didn't know whether it was his own problem or the problems of the few great masters he knew. Yao Meng liked green people, and now even the princess enjoys the excitement of cheating, and the female emperor of Yuzhou also awakened to the hobby of green people. Luo Tan glanced at him and said softly, "Besides that, you were the only one who dared to secretly look at my legs and even coveted them when my clone came to Lianji section." At first, she thought that this young cultivator from Lianji sect knew her identity and wanted to get something from her. It was not until later that she realized that this guy didn't want to get anything from her at all. Musian wanted her. Musian was startled and seriously corrected, "Your Majesty misunderstood me. I didn't covet you before." Luo Tan suddenly stood up and got down from the desk. Her tall and sexy figure was looming in the moonlight, but her gentle voice was filled with undeniable majesty. "You dare to say that you have never peeped before when we first met in Liangyi sect?" It's just an appreciation of beauty. After all, you know, there are very few stockings in Dongzhou." Musian did not deny it. Luo Tan raised her white chin slightly, a trace of disdain flashed in her beautiful eyes. "So you secretly stared at other people's legs when we first met? Do you want to hold them and lick them when the situation allows?" Although she has never been in love, it doesn't mean that Luo Tan really doesn't understand anything. At least she now has a firm grip on one of Musian's hobbies. Musian hesitated, "I think there might be a chance tonight." Luo Tan was silent for a while, her eyes flickered, she was a little shy in a rare moment, and she glared at him resentfully, "Get out." Musian turned around and left. "Try to leave." Luo Tan's voice was cold, and her pretty face was covered with frost. "I wanted to tease this little guy who had just practiced for less than 20 years, but I didn't expect that he would be teased instead. Although His Majesty Luo Tan has existed in the world for tens of thousands of years, in fact, there is still a little girl in his heart. He still can't tease her too much, lest he completely angers her. Then tonight, the character of AICAO may have to exchanged." Musian complained in his heart, stopped, then turned back to Luo Tan, held her slightly cold hand, and said softly, "Just kidding, even if His Majesty drives me away, I won't be willing to leave." Of. Luo Tan glanced at Musian faintly. This young man had a whiteness and delicacy that she had never seen before. The most important thing was that although he spoke like a majesty when facing the Empress of Yizhu, he would not make people feel, "What sense of distance is there between the two parties?" This was different from any junior she had encountered in the past. After all, who among the other juniors would dare to hold her hand so openly? Did he even dare to spy on her when they first met? "I have something to ask you," Luo Tan said suddenly. Musian nodded and said, "Your Majesty, please speak. Have you ever had physical contact with the princess since you went to Yunzhou before?" For a moment, Musian felt that Luo Tan seemed to have read through his mind. The silvery light of the moon was flowing in those beautiful pale golden eyes, so sacred and majestic. For some reason, Musian suddenly felt that as long as he made a slight mistake in his answer, this Yahuang line might be sent. He said calmly, "Yes. I had already made out secretly with Her Royal Highness the Princess in Yunzhou, I'm sorry." Luo Tan's eyes flickered, a little surprised, but also a little relieved, and whispered, "I thought you would get away with it. The princess once said that you are her most trusted friend, so I think it is your Majesty's words that should not be concealed." Musian sighed softly, "I'm sorry. With the princess's charm, it's natural that you can't control her, rather, it would be wrong for someone to seduce you even though they are nominally married." Luo Tan's tone suddenly became a little colder, which also made Musian jump slightly. "These two best friends won't fall out because of me, right? Then my sin is really big. Could it be that the legend of the nine-tailed fox causing trouble in the court is true?" Before Musian could speak, Luo Tan said in a calm tone, "You don't have to persuade me. If the wrongdoers are not punished, everyone will make mistakes in the future." She looked at Musian and said, "The same goes for you. Even if the princess seduces you first, you will still be seduced by her in the end. If Emperor Daipen finds out about this, even I can't protect you. The same goes for Emperor Qing, it will also be wrong. Close your eyes." There was a bit of sternness in her tone, as if at this moment, she had turned into the Empress Luo Tan who did not allow anyone to infringe on the imperial power in the court. "I thought His Majesty called him tonight to perform a spiritual energy exchange ceremony, but I didn't expect that he was going to reprimand him for having an affair with the princess in Yunzhou." Musian lamented in his heart, looking at the majestic eyes of the Empress in the luxurious white dress, he closed his eyes subconsciously. At this moment, Luo Tan glanced at the corner of the dormitory inadvertently. The originally majestic beautiful eyes now showed a trace of amusement. She tore off the material of her white skirt, then directly covered Musian's eyes, pretending to be cold and said, "You are not allowed to untie it yourself." After saying that, Luo Tan looked at the beautiful woman walking in the corner, raised the corner of her mouth slightly, walked behind Musian deliberately, and asked softly, "Are you ready for punishment? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 524. The soft and sweet voice sounded in the bedroom, and it seemed to be teasing Musian's heartstrings. But at the same time, Musian had a big question in his heart. Where is the promised punishment? Why does it feel like Luotan is teasing him? Who would punish someone by using the fabric of their dress to cover their eyes? And there was no coldness in her tone. At this moment, Musian couldn't see what the alchemy queen was thinking at the moment. When Luotan asked him if he had been secretly close to the princess, Musian wanted to hide it at first. But before that, Musian thought of another thing. When did Luotan guess that a wisp of spiritual consciousness separated from Yao Meng was living in his Qinglian ring? When he first came to Yuzhou a few days ago, Luotan must not have noticed it, otherwise he wouldn't have to wait until tonight to reveal it. And he had no close contact with Luotan before tonight, so Luotan naturally couldn't have noticed the abnormality in the Qinglian ring. In other words, someone should have reminded her. Who could that person be? The person who is most likely to know the secret of the Green Lotus ring and tell Luotan the secret seems to be the princess. In other words, Luotan asked him if he was close to the princess tonight, just to confirm whether he would tell this lie in front of her. Musian's vision was pitch black, the fabric of the white dress covered his eyes, and even his spiritual consciousness was temporarily blocked, but Musian smelled the faint fragrance of the white dress of the woman next to him, and he was inexplicably relieved. Judging from Luotan's tone and attitude just now, he should have made the right bet. But then again, why did the princess tell her everything? It was said that this was a secret between her and me. Although he knew that the relationship between the two was much better than he thought, Musian still didn't expect that the princess would tell Luotan about their intimacy. I know you must be guessing what kind of punishment I will give you, right? At this time, Luotan walked around Musian and said with interest, but before that, I want to ask you a question. There is a prize for the correct answer, Musian asked. Luotan was a little surprised and smiled, of course, but since there is a prize for the correct answer, there should be a punishment for the wrong answer, right? Your Majesty, why don't you tell me the question first? For some reason, Musian always felt that the other party seemed to be digging a pit for him to jump into. Luotan passed his hands over Musian's shoulders and pressed on the chair behind him, looking at the blindfolded boy, smiling. Since you had physical contact with the princess when you were in Yunzhou before, you should know what she looks like. Is she very beautiful? Musian hesitated and said, Her Royal Highness the princess is indeed very beautiful, but your Majesty is even more beautiful and is not inferior to Her Royal Highness the princess. Luotan was stunned, and then looked at the boy with a slight smile, feeling very interesting. She hadn't asked yet, but Musian already knew what she wanted to ask, and even stopped her from talking in advance. Luotan naturally didn't know. Musian, who had experienced many such questions in the past, had naturally guessed what she wanted to ask when Luotan opened her mouth. Such a life-threatening question would definitely not be safe no matter how it was answered. She might not be happy if she chose Luotan. After all, the princess was her best friend, and she was also close to Musian. But if she chose the princess, then she would be even less likely to be happy. The only solution was to praise both of them before the question came out, and stop the question. Haha, although he was in the realm of harmony, he was still not as good as me in terms of emotional experience. Seeing Luotan silent for a while, Musian couldn't help feeling a little proud. However, at this moment, he heard Luotan's soft and sweet voice again in his ears, Then who do you think is more comfortable to kiss, me or the princess? Musian's thoughts were slightly interrupted. Wait a minute. Why would you ask such a strange question for no reason? Your Majesty. Me, Luotan's voice was a little strange. Musian shook his head and sighed, Your Majesty, I'm sorry that I can't answer your question. Luotan, Is there something else that you can't tell me? She looked at the boy who was blindfolded by her, and then looked at the beautiful woman standing on the other side of Musian with a playful look. Musian was calm. If I answer now that it is your Royal Highness the Princess, what will you think? Luo Tan didn't say anything. But if the person I answer is not Her Royal Highness Princess, what will you think? Musian sighed, you will think that I am sweet-talking, flattering you in front of you, and licking Her Royal Highness Princess in front of her, and I have two sets of words in front of people and behind her back, so no matter how I answer, it is not appropriate. Luo Tan was silent for a moment, and suddenly chuckled, if you can use your mind completely on the right path, it will be enough for you to be my counselor in the future. Musian smiled and asked back, if I don't become a counselor, I can't stay by your side. Although he didn't see anything, Musian took Luo Tan's hand by feeling and said softly, you can have many counselors around you, but I am the only one who can assist you to the end. He is a born furnace, so he is naturally qualified to say these words. For a moment, Musian could feel Luo Tan's body stiffen slightly. Although he didn't see her expression, it was not difficult to imagine that something was obviously wrong with the woman's expression at this moment. Like Yao Meng, this empress has high attack and low defense. She can tease others, but once it is her turn to be the one being teased, Luo Tan will feel a little shy and happy like a little girl. You haven't answered the question I just asked. At this time, Luo Tan suddenly spoke softly with a somewhat shy tone. Musian shook his head slowly, if you are referring to who to choose between the princess and you, then I cannot answer, and the relationship between me and your highness happened a few days ago. The intimacy has been separated for a long time, and now I can't choose intuitively. He originally thought that this explanation was enough to make Luo Tan give up the question. However, at this time, he heard Luo Tan ask in a soft voice. What if I let you experience it before making a choice? Then there is no doubt that the person I will choose must be you, Musian replied calmly. Because I'm right in front of you now, can I give you the most intuitive feeling? Luo Tan seemed to know the meaning of Musian's words, pursed his lips and chuckled, then if I am not the only person who is close to you now, what choice will you make? Musian was startled. Something seemed wrong about these words. He was about to speak, but at this moment, he felt the woman's red lips gently press against his lips. Her eyes were covered by the white fabric of her dress, and her field of vision was pitch black. But for some reason, it was this dark field of vision that allowed people to feel the woman's aura more clearly. This is not Luo Tan. After feeling the kiss of the woman in front of him for a while, this thought flashed through Musian's mind almost immediately. Although the other party blocked his own aura, for some reason, Musian had such an intuition in his heart. The person he is kissing now is not Luo Tan, there is a third person in this dormitory. At this time, Luo Tan hugged him from behind, gently pressed his soft body against Musian's back, and said in a soft and sweet voice, do you like this surprise? Musian was silent for a while, trying to untie the white skirt that covered his eyes. However, at this time, Luo Tan reached out and held Musian's hand, stopping his movements, and said warmly, don't untie it, she is a little shy, so let's keep it like this for now. At the end of the sentence, he raised his eyes and looked at the beautiful woman in front of Musian with a smile. The two women happened to surround Musian one behind the other, and he felt that the speed of his brain seemed to have slowed down a lot. After a long time, their lips parted, Musian breathed out softly, boldly stretched out his hand to hold the woman's soft little hand, and then whispered, Your Highness the Princess. The dormitory fell into a brief silence. The princess frowned slightly, glared at Luo Tan who was watching the show angrily, and then said, How did you find out? It should be said that she is a gentle woman. Even when she is angry, she gives people the feeling of being a little lover staring at you with a resentful look. Musian smiled, if you can't even detect the fragrance of Her Highness the Princess, then as Her Highness the Princess underground lover, I would have failed too much. The princess had indeed blocked her own aura, and it was impossible for him to detect it given his state of mind. But the princess was so close to him just now, how could Musian not notice it? "It's just that I'm a little strange, why are you here tonight?" Musian suddenly asked. "I asked her to come." Luo Tan untied the cloth covering Musian's eyes. Wearing a luxurious white dress, the picturesque alchemy empress said with a smile, "I already know roughly why you and the princess are intimate. You want to understand the law of the Great Road, right?" Before Musian could speak, a trace of teasing flashed across Luo Tan's bright eyes. "In the past, there were many people who wanted to use our Dapen Emperor's wife to understand the Great Path, but I didn't expect that she would choose you in the end." Musian was speechless. "So your majesty knows everything." He knew that the princess had a good relationship with Luo Tan, but he didn't expect that the princess would tell Luo Tan even such a thing. "She didn't tell you what happened between you and her at the beginning, but I was already a little suspicious when you returned to Yizhou today, so I tested her a little during the day," Luo Tan said with a smile. "But what do you mean by calling Her Royal Highness the Princess to the dormitory tonight?" Musian asked in a somewhat tentative tone. "Since you want to understand the laws of the Dao, the easiest way is to enter and exit the Dao, and then try to see if you can resonate with the Dao at the moment you step into the peak of the return to void. As long as the Dao recognizes you, you will be able to use the Dao to harmonize the Dao." Luo Tan looked at Musian and said softly, "Tonight you will be able to return to the peak of virtual reality. As for whether you can achieve enlightenment or not, it depends on whether the Dao recognizes your existence." Musian's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Luo Tan's beautiful face and the hint of shyness in the woman's aloof eyes, and he already knew the meaning of her words. Luo Tan wanted him to break through the peak of return to void tonight, and then use the special physique of the princess to be connected to the Great Dao to comprehend the Great Dao in one fell swoop. Only moonlight fell through the window in the bedroom, and the bedroom fell into a brief silence, and the atmosphere seemed a little ambiguous. "Let's not talk about the princess. Although she is the wife of the great Peng Emperor, she is a virgin. She has the mature sexiness that only young women have, and she is as pure as a blank sheet of paper in terms of feelings. As for Luo Tan, maybe in the eyes of the cultivators in Yizhou, she is an inviolable empress. However, like the princess, she has never had any physical contact with the opposite sex in the past. But under such circumstances, she actually secretly called the princess tonight. This is really a surprise. Why don't you say anything? Are you still blaming me for teasing you just now?" Luo Tan looked at the silent boy and suddenly chuckled, "Or, what are you hesitating about?" She tiptoed slightly and whispered in Musian's ear, "For example, you can only satisfy one person or something." This sentence seemed to be able to ignite people's inner emotions. Even Musian couldn't stand such doubts. He couldn't bear it anymore, put his arm around Luo Tan's plump waist, looked at the princess beside him, and said, "Sister princess, is it okay?" The princess pursed her lips and leaned gently in the boy's arms. Then, a gentle and sweet voice sounded in the bedroom, "Of course. Please keep it a secret from Dapen Emperor, and then, experience the avenue to your heart's content." That night, Yizhou was no different from usual, with a prosperous scene everywhere. The people sang praises to the name of the Empress, and the palace had attendants patrolling as usual. No one in the palace was lazy during the patrol. Even in the middle of the night, their Empress would often review memorials without sleep after returning to the bedroom. Even Her Majesty was like this, so the people below should naturally learn from her. However, no one knew that their Majesty was not reviewing memorials tonight, but was. Boom! At a certain moment, there seemed to be a deafening thunder in the sky above the palace of Yizhou, which also attracted the attention of countless monks in the palace, and they all looked up. That was the bedroom where Her Majesty lived. For a while, people couldn't help but secretly discuss it. They thought that Her Majesty had refined some elixir again and attracted the elixir disaster. At this time, With the bedroom as the center, a pentagram formation quietly spread from all sides, and the soft white light rippled like ripples, and also quietly covered the vast spiritual energy that originally overflowed from the bedroom under the formation. The thunder just now dissipated. Deep in the Yaokai Holy Land, Yao Meng seemed to have noticed something at the first time. She looked up in the direction of Yuzhou and fell into deep thought. Not far from her, a girl with a cold temperament slowly opened her eyes. Her skin was also covered with a faint silver glow, holy and charming. "Saint Lady, what are you thinking about?" Yaokai Saint Lady asked softly. Yao Meng said with mixed feelings, "I didn't expect that there would be a day when I would personally give my lover to other women to enjoy." Yaokai Saint Lady. Yao Meng shook her head and smiled, "It's okay, you can practice here with peace of mind." "Are you going out, Saint Lady?" Yaokai Saint Lady asked. Yao Meng nodded and said faintly, "Go to the restricted area to relax. By the way, I want to ask Chiener something." Yaokai Saint Lady couldn't help but be stunned. The master asked the apprentice, what did he want to ask? So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 525. Call. Musian slowly exhaled a breath of turbid air and opened his eyes as morning approached. The temperature in the dormitory was suitable, and a soft jade body slept on each side. He turned his head and glanced at the beautiful face of the Yuzhou Empress next to him, and then looked at the mature and gentle woman on the other side. The princess couldn't help but close her eyes again. He was recalling the feeling he had when he had just reached the peak of returning to virtual reality. Although the spiritual energy in the cauldron is almost exhausted, Musian's spiritual consciousness is stronger than ever at this time. He can clearly understand the low-pitched conversations and even the footsteps of the busy servants outside the dormitory. Heard. Even the content of other people's voices can be fully absorbed into the ears. Even his own essence and blood are stronger than ever before. This is the benefit brought by peak return to void. It's possible to raise a person's realm to a higher level at once. I'm afraid only Luotan's natural furnace body can do that in this world. At this moment, Musian's heart was filled with sighs. Only now did he realize how Yao Mengruoxi and the others felt before. After this promotion, if he wants to in the future, he can continue to become stronger through complementation with Luotan. "Why did you wake up so early? Could it be that it took so long last night and you weren't tired at all?" At this time, Luotan gently put a hand on Musian's face, and there seemed to be a trace of laziness in his soft voice. His delicate body was next to Musian, looking at him with a smile. "It's a bit tiring, but it can satisfy you and Her Royal Highness." "Mu thinks it's worth it," Musian said with a smile. Luotan's indifferent smile faltered slightly, as if she was remembering everything that happened last night, and her eyes looking at the young man became a little unnatural. Musian looked at the sleeping princess and said softly, "Your Highness, you should have woken up long ago, right?" The princess's curled eyelashes trembled slightly, and then she slowly opened her eyes. She noticed the eyes of the best friend next to Musian, her pretty face blushed slightly, and she couldn't help but lower her head. She didn't expect that one day she would sleep with Luotan, and more importantly, with the same man. When the princess thought of this, she felt complicated in her heart. Looking at this scene, Musian couldn't help but grin, and reached out to hold the princess's soft little hand. Thinking about how he had to hide under the table to avoid being noticed by the princess when the princess came to see Luotan, and think about it now. Although you have returned to the peak of virtual reality, don't be too happy yet. History books record that many monks perished in the catastrophe of enlightenment. Only after true enlightenment can you truly feel at ease. At this time, Luotan suddenly spoke softly to remind. "The 9 cauldron void refining pill that I have refined can give you at least a 70% chance of enlightenment, but after all, you are born with a furnace body. On the road to immortality, the stronger the physique, the harder it will be for people to gain enlightenment. Don't do it at the last moment. Too careless. Musian became a little more interested. He held the princess's delicate hand with one hand, and put the other hand around Luo Tan's waist. The stronger the physique, the harder it is to realize enlightenment. Is this also a rule of heaven and earth? Luo Tan smelled the warm breath emanating from the young man's body, her heart trembled slightly, and she subconsciously leaned into his arms to enjoy the warmth. However, due to the presence of her best friend, she forced herself to calm down and hummed reservedly. You should know that a monk's thunder disaster is related to his own talent. The stronger the talent, the stronger the thunder disaster he encounters. Musian nodded. He had heard of this. In the past, he had seen the 9th level thunder tribulation experienced by Biruoxi, Lan Mulian, and others. This thunder tribulation was extremely difficult, which also meant that their talents were among the best. Musian thought for a while and asked with some relief, so my talent may be among the best. Luo Tan glanced at him and said, your talent may not be the best, but the natural furnace must have the best physique. The calamity is determined based on the physique of the person who overcomes the calamity. In other words, the stronger your physique, the more difficult it will be to overcome the calamity. Wait, it means that my body with the natural furnace is the top one, so my enlightenment calamity will be adjusted according to the strength of the natural furnace. Musian suddenly understood Luo Tan's words. But my natural furnace can't give me any help in battle. Luo Tan put a hand in front of her plump and straight breasts, walked out of bed, and changed into the gorgeous dress in front of the bronze mirror. The noble and elegant temperament of the past seemed to have a more mature and charming charm today. She turned her back to Musian and only gave the young man a beautiful back view. The rules of heaven and earth will not care about you so much. There used to be an auxiliary body in Kyushu that could temporarily improve the realm of others in battle and strengthen the opponent's mental power. She was extremely popular among the 9 provinces, and was eventually snatched up by the northern underworld, but she eventually fell in the heavenly tribulation of enlightenment. Because at that time, the heavenly tribulation of enlightenment determined that her physique was one of the most powerful in Kyushu, so she was given the most difficult heavenly tribulation. The power of that heavenly tribulation was no less than that of the physical tribulation in the Hedeo realm. Musian was speechless for a moment. There is something wrong with the rules of this world. This is like having your own priest with several god-level skills. As long as the priest can assist his teammates, he can successfully pass the level. But one day, someone suddenly told the priest that you have to use these god-level auxiliary skills to clear the dungeon alone. But the problem is that these auxiliary skills cannot be used on oneself. How does this work? Do you want to hit it with a stick? Luo Tan paused and smiled brightly, but don't worry, you have 2 constitutions like me, right? Although each constitution will double the difficulty of the heavenly tribulation, at least you don't have to use an auxiliary body to deal with the heavenly tribulation. The 9-tailed demon body is one of the most powerful in the demon world. It is not difficult to survive the catastrophe. Musian was stunned for a while before he woke up as if in a trance. He looked at Luo Tan blankly. According to your opinion, does it mean that every time you have a powerful physique, the difficulty of the heavenly tribulation will double? Will the difficulty of realizing the heavenly tribulation be superimposed according to one's own physique? Luo Tan nodded slightly and said, don't worry, having 2 constitutions will certainly double the difficulty of the heavenly tribulation, but with the help of the Juding Void refining pill I refined, it is not difficult to survive the heavenly tribulation of enlightenment. What if there is more than 1 constitution? Musian asked. Luo Tan raised her eyebrows slightly and said, I also have dual constitutions, but in the end I successfully passed the catastrophe of enlightenment. When the princess saw that Musian was silent, she thought he was still worried, and gently comforted her. Although it is difficult to understand the heavenly tribulation, there are many examples of monks with multiple constitutions surviving the tribulation in the past. There is no need to worry about dual constitutions. I don't have a dual constitution, Musian sighed. Luo Tan frowned slightly and said, could it be that you have three types of physiques? Musian shook his head slowly. At this moment, even the princess felt something was wrong. Since there are not three constitutions, what are you worried about? Musian looked at her silently. There are more than three kinds. Four constitutions. The princess's face changed. The difficulty of enlightenment heavenly tribulation will be adjusted according to the talent of the person who overcomes the calamity, and a monk's physique is often one of the simplest and crudest ways to identify talent. Seeing Musian's face becoming more and more sad, Luo Tan said to himself with some confusion, are you a chaotic body with more than four constitutions? Why have I never heard you mention it in the past? As she spoke, she sat on the edge of the bed with her legs tilted. Under the hem of her gorgeous white dress, her fair calves were placed right next to Musian. On her feet were a pair of sexy embroidered flat shoes, with cyan veins on the instep. It forms a unique beauty with the white instep. I thought the chaos body was not rare, so I didn't mention it. Musian shook his head. Chaos bodies are indeed not particularly rare, but more than three types of chaos bodies are very rare. Luo Tan paused and comforted, but you don't have to worry too much. The difficulty of realizing the heavenly tribulation is determined by the strength of your physique. The strongest of your physiques are the natural furnace cauldron body and the nine-tailed demon body. The rest are the combined physiques may not make it twice as difficult to comprehend the heavenly tribulation. What are your other physiques? The princess suddenly asked. If I remember correctly, Sword Immortal Protective Body was the second physique I got, Musian said. Gong Lianyu. Luo Tan's eyes changed, and she vaguely realized that something was wrong. Gong Lianyu is famous for her sword. The status of immortal in the hearts of monks is the most sacred, and the word sword immortal is enough to prove how valuable this physique is. This was the first time she heard that besides Gong Lianyu, there were other people in Zhuzhou who also had sword immortals to protect their bodies. What about other than that? Is there anything else? The princess asked. She knew that if it was just a physical condition, Musian's face would not be so ugly. A natural spirit. Luo Tan's eyes flickered and he whispered, the physique of the princess of the restricted area. In addition, she should also have the body of a nine-tailed fox. Any one of these four physiques in Zhuzhou is enough to arouse the admiration of the monks, but these four physiques unexpectedly appeared in one person. No wonder his expression is so heavy. The sky-swallowing demon body, the destiny holy body, the innate Tao fetus. However, Luo Tan had not yet recovered from her previous thoughts. When she heard Musian read out a constitution, her expression finally changed. The princess's red lips were slightly opened, and she looked at Musian with some surprise. Musian looked at the personal interface silently. There is also the body of the medicine immortal that was added just now. Luo Tan was stunned for a long time, and finally realized something, and said, can you absorb other people's physiques and use them for your own use? If you think about it carefully, aren't the physiques Musian mentioned related to the women around him? Even her medicine immortal body has become one of Musian's physiques. A chaotic body that can absorb other people's physiques for its own use. If it were normal, Luo Tan would be shocked and pleased with Musian's talent. But now Musian will start to enlighten the Tao after taking the Juding refining void pill. If the laws of heaven and earth become aware of Musian's chaotic body, what kind of disaster will befall him? But you don't seem to have absorbed my physique. The princess asked doubtfully. Musian shrugged, maybe it's because the great Dao is superior to the universe. Not only the princess, but Lin Ling's speech spirit body Musian was also unable to absorb it for his own use. The two women have one thing in common, that is, they are both involved in the avenue. Since Emperor Qing will send you to Yuzhou, he should have already thought of a way to deal with it. Maybe he should find her before the tribulation. Luo Tan thought for a moment and said, in short, I will refine the Judding Void refining pill in the next few days, but you must let me know before going through the tribulation. When she spoke to the end, her tone was somewhat solemn and admonishing. Once the heavenly tribulation of the enlightenment realm descends, the shielding technique that Linglong left on Musian's Tiansheng furnace will no longer be effective. Once the secret of the Tiansheng furnace is exposed, Musian will attract two groups of people. One group of people will try every means to win him over. After all, the temptation brought by the Tiansheng furnace is too great. The other group of people will kill him at all costs, even if it means offending the Green Emperor. After all, Musian's Tiansheng furnace is equivalent to being able to continuously help the female emperor of the Hedeo realm to ascend to heaven. Which great Hedeo realm will not be angry when seeing this? In the long run, Musian's background will become more and more huge, and this gradually powerful force will sooner or later threaten their position in Jizhu. Even if Musian does not have that idea, it will make people wary. Musian nodded modestly, I understand. He looked at the princess and said, Sister Princess, can I ask you for a favor? The princess raised her eyebrows slightly, looked at Musian tenderly, and said, if you have any requests, just say it directly, don't worry about anything. Luo Ten was also a little curious about what Musian wanted to do, so he looked at him in confusion. This matter is related to Senior Linglong, Musian said softly. If it can be done, my enlightenment tribulation will be much smoother. Lianji sect. The space crack appeared silently outside the peak of Lianji Peak. Musian, who was dressed in a low-key manner, took the princess's hand and walked out of the space crack. The princess, dressed quite maturely and charmingly, walked to the front of Lianji Peak with a graceful manner. After taking a few glances, a trace of surprise flashed across her beautiful eyes. I have heard that the formation of Lianji sect is extremely exquisite in the past, but I have never had the opportunity to see it. Today I finally saw it. Musian let go of her hand calmly, raised his head and said, I will write a letter to my senior sister and ask her to unlock the formation of Lianji Peak and let us in. The princess hummed lightly, then looked at Musian gently, what is your relationship with this Linglong? Who is my senior sister to you? Why do I feel that you seem to be deliberately keeping a distance from me from the beginning? Are you afraid that they will know the relationship between you and me? Musian. Facts have proved that women's IQ is off the charts when they catch an adulterer. Musian shook his head and said softly, Linglong is my senior sister is naturally senior sister. Don't you also want the things between us to be exposed? The princess nodded thoughtfully, and soon returned to her usual gentle smile, well, you are right. While the two were chatting, the paper crane had already flown into Lianji Peak. After a while, a crisp and pleasant aaaa sound came from the peak. The singing sound was as beautiful as the sound of nature, and it seemed to reveal the longing for someone. As soon as she arrived outside the peak, the pure and innocent Miss Linglong saw Musian's figure. She blinked her red eyes with joy. Before Musian could remind her to restrain a little, the next moment, Lin Ling had opened her arms and threw herself into Musian's arms. The soft body completely nestled in Musian's arms, rubbing her face against Musian's face, while singing AAA joyfully, completely ignoring the woman next to her, as if she didn't notice her existence. The princess finally realized the problem and looked at Musian with a smile. You call this a senior? Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us, we will handle it as soon as possible, thank you for your understanding.